go.
Hey everyone, how's it going? We are back with yet another episode of AWS What's Next, the show where we bring you the latest and greatest features and launches from the folks here at Amazon Web Services. We have an action-packed episode. I feel like I say this every single episode, every single time we get on air, but hopefully by the end of it, you will see this yourself. Before we get into any of the business of today, you're probably wondering who the people in front of you are. My name is Nick Walsh, one of the co-hosts of the show, and I'm a developer advocate here at AWS.
Yeah, and I'm Robert Zhu, developer advocate for AWS, and this is the 6th episode. We've, for those of you joining us who've seen one of the previous episodes, you know what this is all about. But if this is the first time tuning in, you're in for a treat because I agree with Nick for once that this is an exceptional episode. You know, I usually reserve that word, but this one, it's very exciting. I'm not going to spoil it, but we're going to be diving deep into several major announcements that we've made across the board this week. So I really hope you enjoy this episode.
Yeah, for those that are new to the show, or maybe you've caught the tail end of some of the other ones, we love launches. I think that would probably be sort of intuitive based on what we've covered so far, but we also understand that launches are more than just telling you what a product is, the problem it's solving, telling you a little bit about it, maybe even telling you the experience of using it. It's just another level to be able to get to use it hands-on, see it demoed, and actually understand what it's going to look like for it to be in your hands when you want to use it. And that's what we're all about here. We're going to bring on different service team members from each of these launches. We're going to actually go through using these various launches today. I know I keep talking in generalities, Rob. We have a quick news segment, and then we're going to get into the first of 3 launches today. But why don't we give the folks at home something to look forward to? Let's let the cat out of the bag, let them know what we're going to be covering today.
Yeah, sounds perfect. So first up, we're going to be talking about Honeycode. This is our solution for business users to build mobile and web applications and to push them and authorize them and secure them and share them on the fly. I cannot possibly do this justice. We have a demo lined up with Gavin from the product team, and he's going to be taking you through exactly what's going to look like to use Honeycode. And then we have Amazon Rekognition video for media analysis. And what this is going to do is enable you to basically streamline a lot of really manual processes around video editing, video manipulation. And we think that if you're in the video space at all, this is going to make sense. It's going to click instantly. And then finally, and of course not least, we have AWS Solutions Constructs. So for all those of you who are more familiar with the CLI or the SDK, and you like the ways to interact with AWS that allow you to define infrastructure as code, this is going to be very exciting because it's a set of extensions on top of the CDK that give you kind of templates and formula, if you will, to kind of assemble this immutable infrastructure. So, but these are all just incredibly exciting announcements, and we have great demos for each of them today.
Yeah, exactly. And in particular on Honeycode, I know there was a lot of buzz around it, no pun intended there. When it launched, there's a lot of materials around it. But again, we're going to be going through actually what it looks like to build an application from end to end using Honeycode in a little bit. And some of the other demos were eye-opening to me as well that we'll get later on in the segment around some ancillary materials and open source code that actually enables you to use them even easier. I know I'm talking in generalities, and it will make much more sense when we get there. But with that being said, let's get on with the news. Again, we talk about launches here. If it was up to us, we'd run for a 12-hour show. We'd just be getting fed, and I'd be able to give you demos all day, but unfortunately that's not the case. So let's get to the news segment. These are some of the launches that Rob and I picked out. We thought they were quite impactful. Unfortunately, we won't have demos for them today, but we figured it may have been easy to miss them. So first up in that suite of news offerings is going to be AWS announcing AWS Snow Cone. This one was a fun one for me. There were some really cute videos around the launch of it with Jeff Barr and some of the other folks that are involved in the production of the device. But largely, Snow Cone is this edge compute storage and essentially extension of your cloud that is highly resilient. So Snow Cone, for those that may not have seen it, it's small. It's about the size of maybe a tissue box. It is the smaller sibling to the Snowball, which is maybe the size of a guitar case, roughly. And so these are typically used in scenarios where maybe you need extremely low latency computing. You need the device to exist at edge, or maybe you exist in extremely harsh conditions, or you are devoid of persistent internet connection, like maybe out in ag tech scenarios. Really cool stuff, making it even smaller, making it even more cost effective. I think one of the biggest things for me. Really excited to have this be available. I think it costs around $300. The biggest use case I think folks are going to see for it is if you're trying to transfer a large amount of data. There is a break-even threshold where it quite literally becomes cheaper to buy a snow cone and transfer it onto that device and use that to get it up onto the cloud.
Yeah, next up we have Lambda with support for Elastic File System, EFS, and this is generally available. And what this means is that now your Lambda functions have another way to persist state. Lambda, of course, is our serverless code function as a service. And what you can do with Lambda and why it's been so popular is because you can just upload code and not worry about the underlying infrastructure. Is it containerized? Is it running? What do you have to patch the operating system? We handle all of that for you, which makes it very powerful for certain types of architectures. But one of the things that developers have to learn anew with Lambda is how do you persist state, because these Lambda instances can go away at any time. So do you talk to a cache? Do you talk to a database? Do you talk to a file system? And I think this is one of the perfect examples of how we've been listening to customer feedback. Heard from customers for a long time that they want a seamless way to kind of attach a dynamic file system. And we've had that solution for EC2 for a long time. And finally, we're able to bring that to Lambda users.
Awesome. Yeah, next up, we also have Amazon Database Migration Accelerator now available. Essentially, this solves the problem for a lot of folks that are trying to or have accepted that they want to migrate databases from whatever they are on to the destination they're trying to arrive at. And there's a lot of concerns around how to do that securely, quickly, and in a cost-effective manner. And so we have tools previous to this, like Database Migration Service, but Database Migration Accelerator is essentially the white glove service where you will get AWS experts who can come in, assess your migration pattern, your existing database structure, and make sort of this tailored recipe for your migration pathway from your origin database to your destination. There are a handful of pairings for source and targets that are available at launch here. Being Oracle to SQL Server or Aurora, or RDS with MySQL or Postgres. But it says right there in the launch blog post that I think should be available in chat that there will be further integrations in the coming months.
Yeah, and then I want to talk about Deep Composer, AWS Deep Composer. We have a new feature for Deep Composer called Chartbusters. This is a monthly challenge. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Deep Composer, this is our AI-based music synthesis program. It's very interesting. It uses something called a generative adversarial network, which is machine learning lingo for something that's really fancy and produces incredible results with very little data. And so if you haven't checked this out, if you're at all interested in the space of music synthesis, now there's even more incentive to jump in, because what Chartbusters is this feature that we're going to be running this monthly challenge where developers can submit their entries, and we have a chart of top-ranking music that people have produced using Deep Composer. And this is a way to showcase the work that the community has been doing. So if you haven't looked at it, this is a great time to jump in. If you have looked at it, then I hope you participate.
Yeah, self-plug here. We actually had the Deep Composer team on around the launch of, or the general availability of Deep Composer. So that was very exciting. We got some demos seeing it in action. Again, the combination of the keyboard and the software in the cloud. I was going to joke that generative adversarial networks could be another way to describe our partnership, Rob, but then when you started talking about producing great results, I was like, I don't know, we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know. Great results. Jury's out on that.
That's for chat to decide. But last but certainly not least, before we get into the demos, we have the final order of business in the news segment, and that is the Amazon Builders Library, which is a collection of articles, recipes, and essentially guidance to abiding by well-architected principles in a more prescriptive form. A litany of these resources. We launched this at reInvent 2019. Now, the newest launch here for the Builders Library is a new article for safe hands-off deployments. Essentially being able to build more consistent deployments that behave the way that you want, that have healthy fallback patterns and will fail less. I don't know anyone who would not be interested in those things, and I know that there was a lot of really hard work that went into those posts, so check them out, and hopefully you'll be able to bring a learning or two from there into your stacks at your companies. Whew, that was quick, Rob. Five news topics in like under 10 minutes. Man, we're getting good at this.
Yeah, we're on a streak.
All right, cool. Well, one thing that we are not on a streak with is being able to have a demo from a product that is launching for the first time, I believe, on our show. Like that is a bit of a first. Well, start of a streak. Yeah? Yes? No? Maybe?
I think so. I think this one we will see. I know this one I'm personally very excited about because there's a lot of stuff that I want to see in the demo, and we'll be pushing our guests to do this. But I just can't. Let's do this because I don't know how we can do this justice without just showing you. But I will say, I will remind you, for those of you just tuning in, this is live. One of the great things about this format is that you can ask questions in LinkedIn, in Twitch, and we will make sure that those questions get forwarded to appropriate people on the team who can help you answer those questions. Some of those questions that we think are very common, we'll ask the guest directly, and we might even turn that into a discussion topic. So please take advantage of the format here.
Yeah, well, you know what this sounds like, Rob? It sounds like we're writing checks that someone else is going to have to cash when we keep hyping up this demo. Join us after the break. We will be right back with Gavin from the Honeycode team, and we're going to hear all about the newest exciting launch. Hang tight. We'll be right back. All right, and we're back. I don't know. We got to start keeping track of how long we spend on these breaks, but we're trying to keep them as quick as possible. Regardless, I'm biting for time. We want to spend that more effectively talking about the exciting thing of this session, which is going to be Amazon Honeycode. Before we get into any of the details, joining us is Gavin G, Head of Product Management over at Amazon Honeycode. Gavin, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. It's exciting to be here and share what we've got today.
Gavin, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show and talk to you. Now, we spoke briefly about this before, but before we dive in, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and about the product.
Yeah, certainly. We've got a lot to cover, so I don't want to take too much time take away from actually showing the folks, but I thought I'd share a little bit about kind of who I am, what the product is. So as you say, Gavin G, I've been on the team now for a couple of years, and we've been building this product called Honeycode. I will promise today to try and avoid using the code names because it's getting used to using the public name these days. So it may slip, but we're excited to build this new service that is really targeting business users. And we launched it this week, and it's had really quite a great set of feedback from customers so far.
Awesome.
So with that, why don't we jump in, right?
Yeah, let's get into it.
All right.
Again, while Gavin's getting that set up, you know, if anyone has any questions at any point during the broadcast, again, live show on both LinkedIn and Twitch. Get those questions in the chat. We'll be watching, and we'll try to get those answered on stream.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, so we've jumped in. Let's jump right in. So we started on this journey in good Amazon style by really kind of listening to customers. And frankly, we spent a lot of time also talking to internal Amazon users because they face a lot of issues in their day-to-day when it comes to productivity. Like we're a fast, agile company moving quickly, and we want to understand kind of the pain points that those folks had and see what sort of tools that we could bring to bear to improve their team productivity. And there were kind of three things that really jumped out in terms of kind of team dynamics today. One is that business needs are continuously evolving. Like how a team operates this week, actually in 4 weeks from now, they're onto new projects, their needs have evolved, their needs have changed. And frankly, the existing tool sets that teams are using just isn't keeping up with that ever-changing landscape. And the reality of that is that teams have then been trying to use either kind of off-the-shelf software as tooling to help them, be it, you know, custom project management software, event management tools, task tracking tools, and collectively, like they're all great, but they're not perfect. And the real problem is that then that creates a need where these business teams then turn around to their technical teams and say, hey, I need some help. And unfortunately, that just creates such a problem and backlog in IT. It's like, I'd love to build you that tool. I just simply don't have the time, the budget, the money, the manpower, the people to make that happen. And so business teams are really left kind of standing and not being as productive as they could be. And so it's really based on that we set out on this vision of bringing Honeycode to market. And it was all about how do we empower those business users to essentially build their own apps, their own tools, to really solve their team's productivity challenges. And we didn't want to stray too far from this idea of like, it's business users. This isn't really about empowering folks who are already really great technical folks who can use the full power of things like AWS, right? This is about, I'm a program manager. I sit in a business. Maybe I'm managing a project. Maybe I'm managing, I'm a marketer and I'm managing a video production shoot. And I've got all these files that I want to move around. There's stakeholders working on projects. How do I keep track of that stuff? And like how I do it as a team is very different from how another team in another company does that. And so how do I build the right sort of tools to enable those sorts of people? And these kind of program managers, marketers, business analysts, they kind of have 4 key traits they really care about. 1, they really want to be able to stay in the loop of what's going on. 2, we know that people are more and more mobile. And so they want the ability to get access to data that's live updated on their mobile devices. And that's a challenge there. A lot of the tools are great, maybe on the Mac or the PC, but they don't work great on the mobile device. And customers have become so familiar with the great experience of apps on mobile devices. But when it comes to kind of team business tools, they've been left a little wanting. At the same time, they want to personalize that experience. As I said, teams needs are rather unique. And then there is way too much manual process in businesses. And so any ways that we can help teams and automate and improve those processes just gives time back to people and individuals to focus on more high value items. And so those were kind of core 4 capabilities that we wanted to bring to the product. And that's where we came out with the capabilities of Honeycode. And so kind of pivoting back to this idea of a business user who's familiar with a certain set of tools today, we wanted to go where and enable them with the skills that they have. And so number 1 of that is that we wanted to go with their skills of spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are very ubiquitous in business. And we wanted to leverage the skills that people have in that space to use them to manage the data that they have. And so with that, inside of Honeycode, we have kind of 4 key capabilities to enable people to build apps. 1, we have tables. They act like spreadsheets, they are like spreadsheets, but they're actually a lot more than spreadsheets because we've brought new innovations there to enable them to actually operate like a database in a live, updating, and performant way. And so we can do things like joining data together that you could do in a database, but using the visual user interface of a spreadsheet. We've invested in building a new app builder that really is a new visual editor that enables business users to build the user interface of apps and how they want to use apps in their business environment. And it's the combination of building the user interface in the app builder and connecting it to data in a spreadsheet that really powers the magic of Honeycode. Thirdly, we've got an automation capability that is all about how can I build simple to build or automations that match the processes that I want to build for my apps, that match my business processes. And then finally, we wrap that all around this concept of teams. In the way that people are operating in organizations is the boundaries of what a team is continuously evolving. It's not as rigid as it perhaps once was. Like as I sit in, let's say I go back to my example of working on a video production shoot, like who I work with could span across multiple organizations. And so what my definition of a team is there changes, and it changes depending on the project that I'm on. And so we use this idea of teams to say, hey, I as a user can be part of multiple teams. And there's probably going to therefore be a set of data and apps that are associated to those teams that I want to collaborate with people inside of those teams. And so we use that core concept of teams as the really kind of grounding starting point to get started with Honeycode. But that's probably enough of me talking to slides and getting stuck into this. So why don't we jump in and see what this thing actually looks like?
Yeah, I think this is what everyone's been waiting to see. I mean, I know I have, right? Because it's one thing to tell me that, like, hey, we've created an experience that makes something easy for you. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll believe it when I see it, right? Like, I'm great that we've pitched that, but There were some screenshots in the Jeff Barr blog post. What are you going to be able to show us today, Gavin?
Well, I'm going to try and show you a soup to nuts end-to-end experience of building an app. And I'm going to show you how that happens inside of a team that I sit in. And actually, Nick and Rob are in the team with me. I've already invited them. And we're going to go through this process of building an app. And I'm going to show you really how simple it is. I'm going to show you a number of ways to do the same thing. But I'm not going to cover this up with wizards and some of the actually features in the product that make it even easier. I'm going to show you this in its raw form, like building it component by component, just so you get a sense of what it takes to build that.
Awesome.
And just for everybody who's watching, this is launched. If you sign up for Honeycode today, you can do everything that we're doing. Is that right, Gavin?
That's right. I am using an account. I'm not using my Amazon account. I'm using an account that I signed up on the public service. We launched this week. So everybody can go to honeycode.aws and sign up for an account and get started.
Yeah, so this is not vaporware. Just I feel like that needs to be repeated, because I think what you're going to show us is going to be very compelling, and people are going to naturally wonder, well, hold on, what is the smoke and mirrors? And if I understand you correctly, you're saying there are no smoke and mirrors. This is how easy it is.
Yeah, this is completely live. This is the real service. And so you're going to see, one, my terrible typing. You're going to see me go, hang on, where did I move that button to? Yeah, you're going to see this for real.
Okay, I can't wait.
Alrighty, why don't we jump in here? So once folks have signed up for an account, they're going to land in part of the product called the home drive or the My Drive. And so here I've logged into the service. I've got a few items listed here. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of kind of just some of the landscapes, so people are grounded in kind of some of the components that are going on here. So one of the core ideas of Honeycode here is that we have teams. And so teams are actually listed down the left-hand side here. So I can hop over to the team and I can show my team here. So everybody who signs up for Honeycode is created their own team, okay? And in this particular team is myself, and I've actually added Nick and Rob to my team. And you can see here, everybody who signs up gets a free account with the ability to add 20 users, okay? Where we have caps and where there are additional offers that are above that, if you want more than 20 users, you can add additional users. And if you need more data inside of your workbooks, and I'm going to explain what a workbook is in a minute, but this is the homepage where you can control that. And if you're part of multiple teams, you're going to be able to see that in this listing here.
Gavin, we've got one request. Would you mind bumping up the font size in your browser one? Perfect. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so back to the home drive here. So we've got this idea of a team, and I'm showing all of the workbooks and apps of my team. Well, what's a workbook? What's an app? How does this all hang together? So a workbook really is, think of it as the single unit that combines all of the data, all of the apps, and all of the automations for a particular project. So I'm going to show you today just building a very simple task to-do list type of experience, okay? And so I've actually got 3 workbooks listed here. I have already got a to-do workbook. I've got a PO approvals workbook and a workbook called Am I on a Call? And below a couple of them, I have a few apps. And so you can have multiple apps per workbook, actually as many as you want. And it's important then that you got this idea that you create this distinction that you could share apps with different people, even though they're inside of the same workbook that has the same data. And we'll come back to a little bit of how security and users and apps and all that stuff works later once you get a sense of this, but I just wanted to ground you in some of this here. So how do I get started, right? Let's jump right in. So I can create workbooks in a couple of ways. I can click the Create Workbook button. I can start from scratch. I can import a CSV file. So if you've got data existing in a spreadsheet, I can drop it in. Obviously, if I start from scratch, I can copy and paste data in as well. Or I can also use a template. And so there's a collection here. We're going to grow this list. This is just the starting. This is the first week out. We're going to add more templates to the service. And one of the workbooks that I've already got came from one of the templates here, that PO approval. But I've actually created a workbook. So I'm going to jump in, and I did a little bit of editing just to speed things up today. But I'm going to hop straight into this particular workbook. So when I first log in, I see here the sheet view. And so I see tables of data. There's nothing in here. I just created a couple of column headers. So we have task, status, and owner. And I'm going to build a to-do list today. On the left nav here, I have a menu. If I click, I can see the tables that are in my workbook. I have 2 tables, status and task. I have no apps yet. and I have no automation. Okay, so the first thing generally you do is you build out a little bit of your data model, okay? And so I'm going to start off with by actually just putting a little task list in Honeycode here. This is where you get to see some of my typing. I'm going to copy and paste some data in just real quick. And so I've added some very rudimentary, simple tasks, nothing too fun. Run, read a white paper, cook some dinner, iron some clothes, you name it, making it up as we go, right? And what's typical in this type of use case is you've got a bunch of items. I want to see maybe some status against them and maybe who's on task to do this, right? Now, with Honeycode, I can start to build some of this connectivity between the data. What I did already build was just another little table that is 1 column, 4 items, a status table with red, yellow, green. You can see how this might apply to a business sense. And what I can do is if I go back to my task tables, I can now start to connect tables together. So if I select the status column, I go to Format. I can choose this thing called a row link, which gives me the ability to connect tables together. I say, hey, my source is a table, and I'm going to point it to the status table. I click Apply. Hey, presto. And very quickly, I can now see that those items are coming from the other table, their status. And I'm just going to fill a few out of these. And I don't have to just drag. I can copy. I can also fill down. So there's some familiarity here with how a spreadsheet operates. Well, that's kind of interesting. It's not groundbreaking yet, but you just wait. So the third column I've got here is I have this idea of an owner table. One of the things we've done is we've actually connected the idea of team to the data model. And so you can have a new contact type here of a person. We call it a contact. And so I can, again, go to the format menu and I can choose contact type. I'm going to leave the default. And I can actually start to pick people against here. And guess what? I'm seeing the people now that are in my particular team. And again, I can drag down. I'm going to add Rob to the bottom. So we've got a few folks here that are part of this, part of my little project here. Like, okay, so I've got a reasonable data model. It's pretty straightforward. It's not rocket science. Okay, well, now we've got some data. Why don't we build an app? And I can do this in a couple of ways. I come over to the apps menu and I can click plus, and I can do 2 things. I can use App Wizard, and literally in like 45 seconds to a couple of minutes, it's going to make a few guesses, ask you a few questions, and build an app. But that's just too easy. So I'm going to build the app manually myself. So I'm going to choose Build My Own, and it takes us into the app builder experience. Okay, and let me orient you a little bit to the user layout here. On the left-hand side, we have the screens of my app. So by default, when we create a new app, there's 1 screen, and I can add more screens. In the middle, I have the screen layout interface where I can choose to place certain items on the screen. I can edit text, et cetera. And on the right, I have a properties pane where I can configure certain things of those particular options. I also, down the bottom, it's a little hidden until we get to that phase, there is also this thing called what we call the peeking sheet, which gives you a little snapshot back to the data that you're going to be connecting to from inside of your app design. But we'll come to that in a second. Okay, so very, very simply, I'm just going to go build this manually. I've got some options that I can add to my page. I'm going to start out very simply by just adding just a blank list control. Okay, and so I drop a list. I'm going to close this. I can pick this up. So I've got a list. I'm now going to set it to a particular table in my database. So what we're essentially doing is we've got a control on the screen that we're now going to say, please go connect this to data in my table. So I need to go pick the table, right? And so I want to go pick the tasks table. Okay. And as you can see here, down at the bottom, we're now seeing the task table that we created earlier. It should look familiar. And I can now very simply go and add data to my particular app. Okay, so I've done some things. And you can see there it's updated. It's pretty rough right now. Let's go change this. Let's call this task list. Okay, you're like, well, that's kind of nice. Why don't we actually go have a look here at what this thing looks like? Fun part is I can go click View App. Okay, and hey presto, we have 2 apps that have been built in parallel here. I have a web app, which I'm showing you a quick preview of, and it starts to look very familiar. It's not very pretty right now. We're going to go fix that. But I've also actually built a mobile app all at the same time. So if I come back to the builder here, there's a couple of options that are linked by default. I was building in a mobile app stream view, But we've also been building this in a web app view as well. So they're built automatically at the same time. You can disconnect them so they can look different if you want to, but by default, we help you out and make them then look the same. The fun part is I want to show you kind of how live and updating this is. So I'm going to put these two views side by side. All right, build this out. I'm going to put it in mobile, give me a bit more space. Okay, so right now my task list isn't particularly great. Let's do a little bit of layout work. Let's drag this up here. I'm just going to move this over here a little bit. Okay. All right, and you're starting to see, as you'll see on the right-hand side there, my app is actually updating in real time, okay? And so here's the fun part. Why don't we, let me show you how you share apps here. Okay, so I built an app. It's kind of rudimentary at the moment, but I'm actually now going to go share this app with a few colleagues on my team. So we had Nick, oops, and Rob. All right. We've updated. And so the fun part is I've now shared this app with Rob and Nick, but they don't have actually access to the workbook. They only have access to the app in question. And so if Nick or Rob would go log in, either on their web browser or on their mobile device, they'd actually now be able to see this app in real time. I don't know, Nick, if you maybe want to show folks what that maybe looks like.
Yeah, so I've got, my iPhone right here, and to give you all slightly better view of this here, I've installed from the App Store, again, iPhone, Apple, the App Store, open up Honeycode, and so what I can see here on my home screen is any of the apps that I have associated with it. So as this loads, I can probably see under notifications, App 1, a minute ago, Gavin has shared an app with me. All right, so I can open that up. And then I can see right here I have my app list open, and it looks very similar to what you have over there in the browser on the mobile view. Or actually, no, the mobile view is from before, right?
Yep.
Cool.
Oh, that is so cool. Yeah, I'm able to see it on mine as well.
All right, there you go. So we got app share, and I just want to clarify one thing. So the way the apps are shared, web apps, they just have a URL, right? But these apps are pushed out to this mobile app that you download from the iOS and Android stores, right? So you download this one-time app called the Honeycode app from iOS App Store or the Android store. And as soon as Honeycode apps are shared with you, it'll appear in that app view. And so that's how Nick and Rob are seeing that on their device straight away. The fun part is, I think as Nick is still showing the app stream there, as I make updates to the app builder, those changes are rolled out to everybody who's got this app already. So for instance, if I go back and go, I actually want to show who the owner is, I can drop that into my app design here. You're seeing my web app update, and then hopefully in real time there, you're seeing on the mobile device in a completely different location to me, Nick's mobile device is also updated.
Okay, wait, we have to rewind that. You just dragged a row, the owner row, or the owner column rather, into the designer on the left here. And we saw it instantly appear in both the web app and the mobile app. Is that right?
That's exactly right. It's almost instant, but you can see there's some performance, right? So we use this idea of live updating, not just to do app design, but we use this idea of updating of live updating to do the two-way communication in app. So for instance, right now this app is very rudimentary. It just shows a list. But if I go in here and actually set the properties of this middle column and just make it editable.
1 second, sorry, we're rebooting the camera, Gavin, on the overhead. Yeah. Gonna go back to the other screen for one moment. Sorry, continue. I was interrupting you.
That's okay. I was gonna wait. So, so what I've just done in one click is I've made this status column editable. Okay, and you can see over here now in the web app, I can now pick those items. And this is where that power comes from. That status table is now driving a drop down in the app UI. The fun part is if I hands off the keyboard here, if one of you guys now go change one of those items, because you can, because it's now editable.
All right, I'll try that. So I'm going to go to iron close. It's set to green. I'm going to change that over to red.
And there you go. So I'm now seeing my app dates to red. You're also seeing down here in the data that it's actually updated the spreadsheet. And that's how this power of apps and live updating works. But we're not done. We're not even close to done. There's way more in here. Right?
Okay, we're gonna have to get to more, but can we? So, to my understanding, Gavin, you just showed us that we basically have our data as a golden source of truth that is live updating as we edit our UI and auto deploying those updates to all people that are shared with that application. All of that essentially happens seamlessly in one step.
Yep. And I didn't have to deploy any infrastructure. I didn't have to write any code. I literally created an app in the web browser right there.
So I feel like we need to really spend just a couple more minutes admiring what we've accomplished here, because while what you're showing us is a fairly simple CRUD app, right? I mean, most of us have built a to-do app if you're a software developer. But if you're not a software developer, you kind of have to rely on a software developer to build one of these. And if you work in a large company, then you've been through this process, right? This is kind of talking about what Gavin mentioned early on, where if you're a business user, you know, if you rely on IT for these kinds of things, you may be familiar with the process of even if the IT department is staffed properly to build a mobile app, then you're talking about installing enterprise certificates, sideloading the application. You request a feature like, can I edit the status of a to-do list? And that's like a several week work item. And that's just to get the work done. Who knows how long it's going to take to push that out to the internal enterprise app distribution system, right? And what you're showing us right here just cuts through all of that.
I think another thing, like, even as someone who writes code, I see this as an opportunity to automate a lot of things that I'm still doing manually myself. You know, like, just because I could write an application that is, you know, push my stuff from an Excel sheet into a database, I don't want to be necessarily doing that. It may not be worth the time cost to me. Something like this could be way more appealing. Like, I can't even begin to enumerate the number of times that, like, you know, documents are passed around and then stored in a central place and then people update them and all of this, and it's like, this is exactly what solves that problem.
Yeah, and also, I mean, just the light bulbs are going off, right? I could imagine, you know, if we're on a virtual team, I'm out in the field, I'm working with a customer, there's some piece of missing data, I can just ping you and say, hey, Gavin, can we add the, you know, product number column to the inventory? And then can you show me how many units are in stock, right? You know, customer XYZ needs this right now. This is just not possible with a lot of the legacy ways in which we did kind of built proprietary apps for enterprise solutions. So, I mean, wow.
Fantastic.
I was worrying that I was writing checks that you would have to cash, Gavin, but now it's at your own hand. You said there's more. We want to see it. I know there's light bulbs. There's also some questions. You know, you talked a little bit before about you know, authentication. I know that you sent me, by adding my email, you added me to this application. As soon as I start thinking about, you know, data in that workbook or in that, you know, that spreadsheet that you have over there, I'm trying to think like, okay, well, how am I going to access, tier that permissioning, all of these things. And even beyond all of that, you know, it's great to have this live updating spreadsheet that we have here, or this app that was delivered to me. But, you know, I'm sure you have some more bells and whistles for sort of delivering last mile things like notifications and beyond.
That's right. Yeah, let's definitely talk about two key next areas. One, let's talk about automations, and let's talk a little bit about the security and app sharing model that exists inside of Honeycode. Let's talk about automations first and how you could automate this. So let's use this use case and continue that. So if I come back to the left-hand side here, and I'm going to make this a bit bigger just so you can see everything. What's pretty common is in a very simple CRUD app, task app in this particular case, what happens if I want to get notified if, say, Nick changes the status of one of these items? So why don't we just add that? So I can come across here, I can click an automation, and automations really follow a very simple paradigm of some sort of trigger event and then some sort of action based on that trigger event. Pretty straightforward as a concept to understand. By default, we have 4 triggers. 1, if a date or time is reached, if a row is added or deleted to a table, which is kind of useful, like if someone's maybe using a form to submit data in their app and adds a row of data to a table, you could kick off an automation based on that. If a column changes, so if any value in a column of data changes, you can pick out the row that changed, or if a particular cell changes. So in our particular case, right, I want to know, let's say, if Nick's slipping behind on his ironing and he's gone back to like, oh, it's not happening. I got to set my status to red, right? So I'm going to say, I'm going to choose column, and I'm going to pick a table. I'm going to pick the tasks table, and then I'm going to pick a column. In this particular case, I'm going to pick status, right? So we have this reference of square brackets for column titles across the workbook. I'm going to leave everything else default. And in this particular case, I've got then some options. So a trigger condition is set. I'm going to create some actions based on that. And I can do a bunch of different things. I can do a notify, which is both an email or a mobile push notification, because that's the fun part right now, where we have an app on the mobile device, so I can do posts on the mobile device. I can do in data tasks, like add a row to a table. I can delete a row from the table, so you can start to build some pretty interesting automatic processes, like add a row to this table, make a change in this other table, and then delete the source row that was in the original table that kicked this automation off. You can create those kind of flows. I have some variations on that, so I can do an overwrite, or I can do the variation again of like, if the row already exists, update it. If it doesn't exist, add another row to the table, right? And so you can start to build some pretty interesting logic with some of those options. Right now, I'm just going to do a simple notify, right? So I get the view that comes up is an email. So I can actually pull the recipient for this from the table, or I could hard code it. And so I literally can go, I'm going to pick the owner, and I'm actually going to add an email address here too. So get my email address there. Oh, I'm in a different workbook here. Okay, so I'm going to get myself, we'll come back. We'll do this in a sec. This status has changed to equals, and I'm going to pick the status for the task. And we're going to type this for task. Okay, and you can start to see there it's starting to pull out this particular information, right? And I can add more and more. Okay, I'm feeling pretty good with this. I can add a link to the app if I want. And now I click publish. Okay. And give it a few seconds for the automation to be public. Okay, that's all ready to go. And so now, if any time that Nick or Rob go update a status, we're actually going to see an email come through or a push notification to me on the device here. And it'll take a few minutes for that to come through. We have to wait for emails to flow, but it's as simple as that, as creating automations in the product. Now, though the automations I just showed you there are actually just automations inside of really the data. I can also build automations inside of apps. And so I want to show you that real quick. So a pretty common scenario here is, let's say, if I build a new screen and maybe I've got some sort of form on here. So I've got a block, and then maybe I've got another block and I add a button. It's a pretty common scenario, right? And maybe I'm passing data in. I can actually set properties on a button in a very similar way to the automations capability. And I'm diving a lot deeper now, so bear with me here for a second. I can come across to the actions, and not only can I do simple things like make a button navigate to another screen or refresh the current screen, I can actually create automations inside of here. And you'll see here is that there's actually a condensed version of that same automations flow. So when I click the button, I can do a bunch of things like do a notify, add a row of data. And so a pretty common thing is, let's say if I'm building a web form and I've got choices, right? I can either use the live updating mechanism where I've got some input fields, and as soon as I edit text, it updates the sheet, or I can actually disconnect the app from the data service. I can have a bunch of input forms, and then when I click the button, we can validate that everything is filled in correctly before submitting it to the table. So I can disconnect the live updating in that sort of manner. So there's lots of different ways to control how data gets updated, but they're probably things for us to dig into in deeper later sessions. But I just wanted to show you that there is more here under the covers when it comes to automations and controlling data flow between screens. Okay, so we talked a little bit about automations. Maybe we should talk a little bit about how kind of sharing works inside of apps and data. So let's go back to the home screen here, and let me show you some of the user interface here. So we've been building this top workbook here called To Do, and the app that I built is called App 1. That's the name of the app that appeared for Nick and Rob, and I can rename it. So I can very easily rename this app to be something more appropriately friendly inside of the app builder. What I want to show you though is I have two choices, right? Nick and Rob, as part of my team, can collectively now build workbooks in my team. Okay, I'm currently the admin of this team, but they can go create new workbooks and new apps inside of this. But I won't see them unless they share them in that particular sense, or if other people are added. But if I want to control who specifically has access to an app or a workbook, I can share them specifically. So if I shared right now, the app is just shared with Nick, Rob, and myself. Okay, and we see that in this particular screen here. I can also choose to share the workbook. So right now, only Gavin can see the workbook. So Nick and Rob can't go in and change the app. They can't change the data without using the interface of the app. They can't change the app layout of the app. All they can do is they're an app user and use the app in the way that me as a builder have configured it, okay? And so that's really the first level of data security here, is I can control who has workbook access, who has app access, and then there's a third layer that I'm going to show you now, which is about access to data at a row level in tables. And this is some of the fun part. Okay, so let's go back to the app builder for a second. I'm going to go into the workbook here. And I'm going to show you. So earlier, right, we had this very nice simple app. We have a bunch of items. We have different people associated to them, okay? And a pretty common scenario is, if I got the task list here, is like, I actually only want to show Nick the tasks that he's got to do, and he doesn't need to be distracted by everything that Gavin and Rob have to do, right? In one click, let me show you how we turn on a feature called personalization. So I can come back to the list. I'm going to go to properties. It's a bit small here. And I'm going to, on the bottom here, we've got this item called personalization. If you remember right back at the beginning, I enabled a column of data called owner, and I changed it to a contact type. Because it's a contact type, I can now use that context of the user and compare it to the user that's logged into the app. So in my app in the web browser here, I'm logged in as Gavin. On Nick's phone, he's logged into the Honeycode as Nick, as is Rob, right? And you can use that context to compare it to the contact values out of a column. This is easier if I just show you what it looks like. So I can literally go into personalization here. I can pick the owner column, and you'll see what happens. My app has been updated, and it just shows Gavin. If Nick and Rob go into their versions of the app, they'll see, and I think on one of the cameras you'll see here, I think it's Nick's, you'll see now I think it's 3 rows of data in his app, right? Yep. And so here we've suddenly got one app connected to a single data table that's now showing a different user interface for 3 different people.
That's rad.
Pause on that for a second.
Yeah, no, perfect. Yeah, wow, that's really cool. I just think like every single time I hear about another feature that's supported, like watching it work without like a slow redeploy or like I need to update my app from the App Store, like every single time there's another one of these more complicated or more complex features that you show me, and it's just I see it happen in front of me. I'm just wowed every time. Like it doesn't get old.
And not only that, I mean, I have to appreciate this from the perspective of while there are ways to do things like over-the-air updates for apps, this is even faster than, say, a React Native app over the air because we're not doing a bundle reload. This seems to be doing it without any sort of reload, and it's all push-based. So, I mean, at the technical level, this is incredibly impressive.
Yeah, there's a lot of technology happening under the covers to make it look this simple. Say that.
we can get into a little bit of some of that in a bit. Was there anything else in particular you wanted to show off? I mean, we literally 10-15 minutes ago started from scratch from a blank notebook or blank workbook. You created a new one, simple to do app. We walked through creating the spreadsheet that would house all of our data for our application, and then from there you entered the editor, you created the interface. We saw that it simultaneously built mobile and web interfaces at the same time. You showed us the hot reloading between the editor and your other in browser. We showed that reloading instantaneously on my phone. I know Rob said it worked on his as well. What else? We set up actions. So you showed us if we change things, it will send an email. I know I changed some things. I saw Rob changing some on my phone as well. So you'll probably get a bunch of emails now with those notifications. And then lastly, you just saw in 1 or 2 clicks the personalization feature, which is essentially tiered permissioning for access to data within an application with like 1 or 2 clicks. That was like, I'm speechless. Like that's crazy.
Yeah. We do have two really interesting questions that I wanted to forward to you, Gavin. I think they're really good discussion points, especially for those on Twitch who can't see these questions here. One of them has to do with the data, right? So, you showed us how you lock down the permissions so that we can only edit the tasks that are assigned to us. But let's say before you did that, you left the app open temporarily. We were still kind of hacking on it. We didn't know quite how it should look or feel or what the restrictions should be. And during that time, I accidentally went in there and deleted a row. Is there a way to roll the notebook back and recover that data?
That's a great question. Yeah, so we are taking snapshots as changes are made to the workbooks. And so you can go back and recover the workbook at an earlier state, right from inside of the user interface here. You have to be careful though, right? Because as your apps get more complicated, you might think, oh, I just made this little mistake, let me roll the workbook app. But if your app is out there in the wild and there's lots of people making changes, that might be destructive to some other changes that other people have made. So you want to be a little cautious. There are other ways, though, that you could achieve a similar sort of thing. Like natively right now, we don't have full auditing capability, like if any changes happened everywhere that surfaced to the user. We have it on the back end, but it's not visible yet from an end user builder standpoint. But because it's a platform that you can build on, I can actually build that stuff myself, right? I have tables of data. I could set up automations that say, anytime anything in this column changes, including adding a row or delete a column, write that row of data to another table. And so I have a record that it's actually occurred. And so I can actually build my own auditing capabilities inside of my own app if I want to.
Yeah.
And so there are things that you can do here to mitigate some of those problems.
That is very interesting.
Yeah.
I think a related question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say it's a really interesting capability because I think one of the things that people often goes through their mind when they look and observe applications or services like this is that it's a set of abstractions on top of capabilities that I want to perform, and oftentimes the question becomes, well, what is going to be the blocker for me where I want to do something that it doesn't support? And so I was not in any way expecting the answer to be, oh, we don't formally support auditing first party. Well, the tools are actually so generalizable that you can build that functionality yourself. And so it's really amazing that this concept that may not, may be very standard for people that are database admins and operators there, to bring that capability to actually have that confidence that you can run production data out of a Honeycode app without even writing any code because you can build in those features. Like that was actually very surprising to me. That's really cool stuff.
Yeah. Speaking of databases,
cool.
another question we have over here is, can we use external data sources? So you showed us, it looks like we can import data from a CSV file. We can author the data from scratch. But if I have my data sitting elsewhere, is there like a connector or something that I can use to hook them up?
Yeah, great question. This is without doubt the number one request we have. There's no doubt. Like we knew about this coming into launching the beta version of this, and we know it's hot topic everywhere. Right now, as you say, we have an API. It's not as complete as we would like it, but you can do some certain things. I even saw within like the first few hours of the service launching, someone had built a little bit of integration using the API to an S3 bucket and some other things. So there is some capability there today, but it's important. It's not really designed for this business user in mind. Like as soon as you have to step out and code against an API, we've now transitioned back to a more technical user. Our goal is to make that ability to connect to external data a feature of the service, but enabled as a feature of the service for a business user. And so we do expect to bring capabilities like connectors to Honeycode and to enable those experiences, both frankly for AWS services, so data that's stored in AWS services, but there's a whole wide world out of there, and customers are already asking us for, well, can I connect to this data or this product that's outside of the AWS family? It's something for our roadmap. We're going to get to it. Yeah.
Yeah, that the context is really valuable there. I think that everyone always wishes they knew the roadmap of every single tool, and I think one of the more valuable things into understanding is how the team's thinking, how they're prioritizing things, how they would craft their roadmap. And so the additional context around being laser focused on a particular set of business users here helps to sort of contextualize for people like, well, when will this feature come in, or when will this integration for maybe my AWS account come in? And the answer is, and I don't know if you actually, we mentioned it sort of tangentially, but Honeycode lives outside of an AWS account, right? Like it's in its own entire sign-up process. It's billed separately. It has its own unique billing sort of schema, which we'll get into in a moment. But this is, again, not necessarily for the AWS user looking to have a front end that just fronts S3 and Dynamo and their existing resources. This is something wholly separate.
It is. And yeah, it's worth talking a little bit about kind of that sign-up flow and how it connects to AWS. So look, our number one goal here is that there are, 1 billion, 2 billion, somewhere like that, like business users out there, right? They know how to use spreadsheets. They are struggling with these types of problems in their day-to-day, and they're the type of people that we want to empower with Honeycode. They're our primary audience. That being said, like, the initial engagement from customers, especially a lot of the AWS community, has been fantastic. And we are absolutely going to listen to the requirements that also come from that community. And so we could see Honeycode also evolve to being able to support multiple audiences, right? Like business users is number one. But what happens in the future is maybe I want to build a different app that maybe lets me control, maybe it's a new control plane for the AWS services in the console. Why couldn't I do that in the Honeycode app? Like there's all sorts of ideas which you kick around. Like it is just APIs at the end of the day, right? So once we've got the fabric in place to enable those new scenarios, like it's up to the imagination and the creativity of our community. And that's actually a good segue to one of the other things that I want to talk about is another area that we've invested in this product is we wanted to bring the community along with us on this journey. And so we've invested in a community platform really fundamentally because the inspiration and the ideas out there and just the creativity is remarkable. And we wanted to help and foster that community from inside of the product. And so you can get access to the community from the product tier. So if I click over on the help icon, I can actually hop into the community tab. I'm going to make this a bit bigger. And you can see here, you land in the community experience where there's a whole bunch of training materials, getting started, tips and tricks, features. And then there's also a discussion area. So you can jump in here, and these are all posts that have been happening from customers since we launched the service this week, and it's fantastic to see this level of engagement. So if there are additional questions, like people are trying to figure out how to go, check out some of the materials here, ask questions in the community. Our team is staffed, they're engaging to engage with folks on here, but we'd also love to see like fellow honeycoders helping each other, right? That's a wonderful thing when that happens.
Yeah, I love that. One of the items in the forum was that users show eternally as invited. Eternally seems forever and ever. It will never be otherwise. But this is great. I mean, I think this is the exact kind of thing that you look for when you're talking about a new product to make sure that you're getting that traction. I mean, the fact that you're getting this kind of engagement this shortly after launch is really encouraging to me.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, right now, in a rudimentary way, the list of questions that are coming in from our customers here and their asks and their feedback, that is driving our roadmap, right? And so like we're customer obsessed, like we're part of Amazon and AWS, and it's really great to see the ideas and the feedback coming in, and it's already shaping kind of how the team's thinking about where we go from here.
Wait, Gavin, I have a question for you. If I have a product roadmap suggestion, should I post it on Twitter or on your community forum?
I'd love for you to post it in the community forum.
Okay.
That's going to be a more concrete way for us to capture it and add it to our roadmap.
I'll be sure to spread the news. Thanks. Yeah, just wanted to make sure. So next up, I brought up pricing before, the uniqueness of this living in a standalone account that is not tied to any AWS otherwise parent account. So what is the pricing looking like for an application like this?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm actually going to go to the Honeycode website here because it's going to do a better job of explaining it. And I'll talk you through kind of what I'm looking at here. So if folks go to honeycode.aws, this is the front end website where you can sign up to be a Honeycode user. And let's talk a little bit about pricing. So at launch, we have 3 pricing tiers. And like it's been a big question for us, frankly, of kind of how customers are going to use the service. Like how much data do they need? How many workbooks they're going to have? What's going to be the interesting kind of ways that customers use it? And so we've gone out with kind of 3 levels of pricing at our launch here. So as I said right at the beginning, like you sign up for Honeycode, you get everything that I've just shown you right now, the apps that I built, everything is free and enabled in the basic tier. Like all of that stuff is there. Like the caps that we have are up to 20 users and 2,500 rows of data per workbook. Okay, and I want to explain this a little bit carefully. Okay, because this may not be obvious. So users is relatively straightforward. Like if you want to add the 21st user to your team, you need to upgrade to the Plus or the Pro tier, okay? By default, in the basic plan, you can create an unlimited, basically an almost unlimited number of workbooks. I have to be careful using the word unlimited in the world. And essentially, though, they are capped at 2,500 rows of data each, okay, in the basic tier. There are an awful lot of use cases, though, that you can build within 2,500 rows of data, right? That's a very big task list of when you have 2,500 rows, right? Now, if you want to go beyond that, and you want more rows of data per workbook, you can upgrade to the Plus or Pro tier. So the Plus tier has 10,000 rows per workbook, and you can have many workbooks in your team, or Pro has 100,000. We're looking at what makes sense beyond that. Like there are going to be cases where customers say, well, I've got more than 100,000 rows of data. How do I use this? How does this make sense? And so we've designed the database technology underneath to scale. The question is it good to put it in a workbook? Maybe we want a closely coupled relationship with some of the other AWS services where we can store huge amounts of data. Is that the better model? The point is that we need the data in tables to get some of that live updating capability. And so it's a decision we want to make as we see customer feedback, like which way to go. Is it that we increase above 100,000 rows in a workbook? Maybe we create workbook to workbook federation. Maybe we create connectors to other AWS services and other databases. These are all questions that we want to understand from our community of customers. But right now, there's a lot of value that you're getting in these tiers. So as you want more users and more rows per workbook, you need to upgrade to some of these later tiers. And the way that we do that is when you sign up for the basic tier as a new user, you all have to sign up at the basic tier, is that you're just signing up with an email. Okay, there's no AWS account creation at that point. And so you very simply email password, sign up for an account, and hey presto, you're off in the experience that I just showed you. When you want to upgrade to the Plus and Pro tier, what actually happens under the covers is that we connect your Honeycode team to an AWS account, and it's the AWS account that then gets built. Okay, and so the flow, once you do the upgrade to Pro and Plus, is that you'll create an AWS account at that point if you don't have one, and then associate your Honeycode team to it, okay? Because then billing's done against the AWS account. We didn't want to build all that infrastructure right now. Again, it's something that we're going to look at. Are there other simpler ways that we can enable other billing services or other Amazon assets to do some of this? But it's TBD. But that's the upgrade process thing.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, very comprehensive answer there. And again, 2,500 rows, I think when I think about the business tasks that I've solved, like, yeah, we're talking this database level stuff where, the size of the data set grows exorbitantly, but I can't remember the last time I used a spreadsheet in front of me that was more than 2,500 rows, maybe years ago. I could probably name on one hand, right? So I think that for the free tier is going to be a very compelling option for people to not only try out and get started, but maybe to adopt and start building applications on top of.
Yep. Exciting. We're excited to see what people do.
All right, let's see. Wow, yeah, this is not the Honeycode show. This is just, a very big launch that very exciting for many reasons. We've been spending a lot of time on it. We talked about support on the forums. We talked about pricing. I guess one topic that comes to mind is like with access. We covered, personalization, granting access, and limiting access. So let's say, I'm on your team, or I'm in your workbook. You've given me permission. Let's say you've even pared down for only the tasks that I have permission of. But let's say I leave to go join another company. I no longer should have access to this data. What does that revocation process look like? Do you just remove me from the team in there, and then all of the granular permissions downstream sort of update automatically?
Yeah, why don't I kick you out of my team?
All right, hold on one sec. Let me open the phone and we'll show it live. Let's go. Okay, right there. Oh, one sec.
this may take a few minutes for the things to cascade through. So it may not be a great live demo here, but the point is I'm going to show you removing you from the team here. And then as soon as the authorization token expires, then you won't have access to anything as part of it.
Cool. I'll just leave it up while we talk through some of the final things then. Team member. Cool.
He's gone. Nick's gone from my team.
All right. It's only a matter of time before I find out.
Pour one out for Nick, everyone.
So, you spoke a little bit about, the fact that, at the larger tiers, this does tie in with for billing system into the another AWS account. There's lots of tech that makes all this possible. We were surmising about some of the ways that some of the things that we hypothesized could be involved. Is there any of the tech under the hood that we really do want to surface, or anything there, or?
Yeah, why not? I mean, clearly there are some new innovations that have actually exist inside of Honeycode, right? They're not existing services. The service that's been built is Honeycode, but a lot of it is frankly running on AWS infrastructure. So we are a big consumer of S3. We're a big consumer of EC2. Most of the magic you're seeing is really down to 3 core services: S3, EC2, which is most of it, and then we also heavily use the IoT services. So all of that updating that's happening is using a lot of the AWS infrastructure there to do that live notification. But these essentially, as you load workbooks, open a workbook, open an app, we load it into memory. So this is an in-memory database that we've essentially built, and that's why the performance is so high.
That's awesome. That's something that I don't think most people would think about, like right off the cuff, right? Like an IoT service. But when you think about the workload profile here, real time, you want this synced, event stream driven sort of, over the air deployments. That's really innovative use of those IoT services. That's cool.
And just to clarify that too, when people hear IoT, normally they think of some sort of embedded device, a Raspberry Pi or Arduino or these IoT buttons. While those are certainly IoT devices, what we're seeing here is a really creative use of IoT, and you're not the only team to do this, but the IoT is very flexible in the sense that you can use it as a WebSocket gateway, right? It's just a completely managed WebSocket gateway for you. Where you can do these things like push notifications, so you can enable these kinds of real-time interactions. So really cool to hear that you're using AWS in such a creative way.
Yeah,
cool. I don't know, you couldn't see it, Gavin, but on my side here, we've got the no mobile apps now. So my access was revoked. I don't have access to it anymore. Behaving as intended. Awesome stuff. Well, I mean, we're probably at about an hour for this one session, and we have even more to get to, but Gavin, this was really great. Again, I saw the launch materials. I read all of the messaging. They said, you guys are going to make it easier for us to build applications, or for business users in particular to build applications. And I think this demo really sells me on that. And I hope that we can get this in front of the people so that even if they're not AWS users today, because again, this is not an AWS service, maybe they could be getting started to build some of their own apps. I think a lot of the interfaces are familiar. A lot of the user experiences are things that people are familiar with. And a lot of the improvements here are really just, I would call them last mile problems, but I think there's so much more than that, like going from a spreadsheet to, fully managed and permissioned real-time syncing database features is a big jump, in the same way that automating real-time data syncing with app editing and deployment, I don't know, that's far more than the last mile for a lot of folks. That's where they spend all their time in traditional application development. So some really cool stuff. Again, Gavin G, product management from the Honeycode team. Thank you so much for joining us today, Gavin.
My most pleasure. It's been super fun to share what we have, and we're excited to see what customers to do. There's more coming. And frankly, there's more that we could show you as well. So I'm also love to hear from customers and folks out there to say, hey, look, can you if you want more content on certain things, I'm happy to come back and demo more and show other things as well.
Awesome. So one final sign off for Honeycode here. If you're looking to get started, head on over to honeycode.aws, sign up for an account, username and password, and you can get started building apps just like we did today on today's show.
Yeah, and it's free and it's generally available.
Awesome. Well, we've got 2 more very exciting demos coming up. We are going to go to a quick break. I promise it'll be quick. Hang tight. We'll be right back. Thanks again, Gavin. We'll see everyone soon.
Thank you.
And we're back. Quick shuffle of the cards there. We've got another guest up for our second demo session of the day. This one is very exciting to me. I'm a huge fan of Rekognition, use it for a lot of different applications, but in particular we're talking about Rekognition's segment detection features for media analytics workloads. Joining us today to talk a little bit about that is Liam Morrison. Liam, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Liam. So tell us a little bit about what you do with the Rekognition team. I know we have quite a long title listed on there on the screen. You wear many hats at AWS. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so I am a principal solutions architect focusing on practical applications of AI and machine learning across media and entertainment. So I work with larger media customers on their applications of machine learning, computer vision, personalization, recommendation, you name it.
Awesome. Lots of different things, lots of different theaters that you operate in again. So let's sort of recap. This was a lengthy sort of launch title for this segment, but I think there's a lot of moving parts in it. So let's break it down. We're talking about Rekognition Video now having the ability to perform a handful of discrete functions for media analysis workloads. So before we get into those particular workloads, let's take a step back. Amazon Rekognition, purpose-built computer vision service, started out mainly with images and computer vision on static images, but has since evolved and has become much larger in that it offers both capabilities with videos, like we're going to be covering today, but also a large number of different functionalities of which things people can extract value from images and videos. I know that was very generalizable, but are there any in particular that jumped out to you that have come along over time?
Yeah, so we've seen a lot of customers kind of gaining intelligence from their assets, looking for objects, celebrities, moderated content. There's been a long journey of Rekognition heading towards helping content creators and distributors really package and understand their content at a second-by-second or now frame-by-frame level. One of the more recent ones was the custom labels launch. Allowed you to kind of go out from just what labels Rekognition can find and find very specific labels. So logos, animated characters. There's a lot of use cases that media customers were asking for that were very specific to their business. So it didn't make sense to put into Rekognition's broader API.
Yeah, just to jump in here for a minute, I feel like also to help frame this up, we have a lot of different AI and ML services across AWS, and a good way to think about them is that the break between AI services and ML services is how much you need to know about the machine learning process itself, right? And so kind of adding on to what Nick just said, Rekognition is one of our turnkey AI services. You don't really need to know how the training and how the model works under the hood. You can just give it an image and it'll say, hey, look, we think there's 85% confidence that there's a dog in this picture here, right? So just kind of giving a bit more overview. And then what we're talking about here is when you say the custom labeling, this is kind of extending the turnkey feature into a little bit more customization. So kind of heading that down toward the ML kinds of solutions that are a bit more customizable from the ground up.
Absolutely, yeah. So building a custom object detection model can be done in SageMaker, obviously, but many customers find that maybe too much to get down to Jupyter just because they want to find a logo in a piece of content. So it really removes the undifferentiated heavy lifting, and you give it logos and you tell it where the logo is, and it can train a model on your behalf. But you don't have to get down into the weeds of machine learning to do it.
Awesome. Yeah, again, the turnkey solution as sort of the starting point, and then just extending more and more features is a great way to sort of position this launch. I think that when we think about the value of being able to extract this value from content, whether it's images or video, these are often things that we know people can do that in traditional times would be done manually. And so these tasks are typically very laborious. Like I personally, I play a bunch of games. Sometimes I want to, make my own little highlight reels. The amount of time it takes for me to just sift through content to find clips is just, monumental, right? So there are a large number of other features, and Liam, I know I'm probably preaching to the choir because you work with a lot more of these customers than I do, but Can we talk to a little bit of the pain points in that manual process? Because it's more than just like the labor cost or the time it takes to do it. I'm sure there's other concerns as well with traditional media labeling tasks.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to how much content you have and how much you need to know about your content. Historically, obviously, content comes packaged with markers to understand things generally, where to put commercials, hopefully comes in some of the top tier content. But to do something like Amazon X-Ray, for instance, which you pause a scene in Prime Video and you get to know who's in that scene, that requires a different level of information now. You need second by second, frame by frame bits of information. So a lot of times that's done manually, where you have loggers going into the content, noting exactly where the black frame is or where the color bars are, and really creating a lot of that metadata manually. Or in the content creation process, you have people clipping each different shot so you can create promos from material.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, really what this, like, if we were to distill those pain points down to like some key business operating I guess metrics, what have you, like, it's like scalability. Like, let's say I have a large amount of content, maybe in enough time I could have my editors process all of it, but if you just simply need it done by a certain amount of time, there's only so many editors you can have, and the concurrency issue or the availability of concurrent editors can become a problem. The cost of simply editing all of this, like, I think of customers like C-SPAN. I know they've used Rekognition video in the past for tasks just like this to label video, and like, for those that are not familiar, C-SPAN in the United States is a government channel that sort of films almost 24/7. I don't know the specifics, but they have a ton of content. Essentially, it just runs ad infinitum, and so there's sort of no ability to take a step back and pause and label that, because there's more content being generated all the time. So without this like ability to have automated awareness of what's going on in there, delivering that downstream or making it searchable and all of these things would otherwise sort of go by the wayside.
Absolutely, yeah. You're faced with a choice of either pushing it through that full process of logging everything, or ignoring it. And a lot of people end up with backlogs of data that really can have value if they knew what was in it, if they knew what components, what interviews. And it's more than just computer vision. We'll talk about the audio components and all the different things you'd want to correlate together as well.
Yeah, and I think that another thing that occurs to me is, this feature is launching at a very interesting time, when we see more video being produced than ever before, right? We see with the rapid rise of lots of different video hosting platforms, people kind of being more comfortable videotaping various parts of their lives and sharing it on social media. I think that there's another element, which is if we had the data in front of us, we probably see that there's just a lot more raw video coming in, and that requires this kind of editing.
And it's being done more and more remotely. We'll talk about editing, creation in the cloud. Like, yeah, the explosion of like direct to consumer, and just the explosion of people creating their own content. These tools, which might seem very specific to the larger media organizations, are actually becoming applicable to just about anyone these days.
Well, I feel like I have a good frame of reference here for sort of what class of problems this is solving, who's going to find this valuable. But let's get into the meat and potatoes of this. What are the exact features that have recently launched for Rekognition Video?
So on Monday, we launched a new API, which is called Rekognition Video for Media Analysis. And we know there's already been media analysis done using Rekognition, but what our customers were telling us was very specifically they need things that help them create, package, and distribute content. So that led to this new API, which is very specific to these type of challenges. And our hope is that customers bring us more and more of these type of challenges. So the four components of the Rekognition Video for Media Analysis API is segment detection or shot detection, so you can understand when an individual shot changes, which is common for creating promos. Looking for color bars, so Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineer standard color bars, which happen before packaged content. The concept of looking for end credits, and also looking for shot, color bars, end credits, and black frames. So in between pieces of content, you'll have black frames with the lack of audio, for instance.
Yeah, and we spoke a little bit about each of these beforehand. I think some of these are actually familiar to most folks, even if they've never done analysis on media. They may recognize some of these tasks because of some of the artifacts that leak into some things on public broadcast. Do you have any materials where we can look through what some of these actually become when they're visualized?
I have some examples, and then I can get to a demo later.
Awesome.
All right.
Or put another way, when you mentioned that customers gave you the feedback that these are the things that we need to detect. If you have that information on hand, let's say the service can detect all those things that you just mentioned. What do customers do with that information?
Could be used to package or clip the asset. So, and we'll go into it. I can go in API by API and talk about where you might use them if that helps.
Yeah. Let's dive in.
Right. Just 1 second. Sorry, we just having one production issue on my side. I just have to make sure that the source is reading in properly for Liam's feed. So in the meantime, if you guys want to keep talking about some of the features, we'll be able to have the demo up in just 1 second.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to your point on seeing it leaked out, I think we've all seen color bars or jitters on more likely public broadcasts, but it happens throughout the industry at times. Hopefully, we never see it, but you see different things when things aren't frame accurate, and that's one of the things I want to mention about this API specifically, which is again really beginning our laser focus into the media and entertainment industry is the concept that we're providing SMPTE time codes, so it's very specific down to the frame of data when this detection happens.
Cool. We're actually good on our end, so Liam, you can kick it off whenever you're ready.
All right, sounds good. So as you mentioned, there is a very large stack. Today we'll be focusing mostly on the vision services, but I did want to highlight that we'll likely be needing information from other higher level services and maybe even in lower level services down the stack. So don't want to spend too long on the stack. Today we're focusing on one new API within Rekognition. So when looking at a media asset, typically consists of different types of markers that happen along the lines of the content. Hopefully you're not seeing these like the SMPTE color bars at the beginning, but there's also then maybe black frames that happen in between segments on, say, a news show or different components, and then content usually ends with a set of end credits. So also, once you get in the content, most content is comprised of multiple different shots. So that's the camera takes going from one shot to another, comprising a segment, for instance. This is just general introduction to media assets. I'm sure you know this. However, the API now that we have is a asynchronous API that allows you to start segment detection, at which point you will be able to run an API that gets the results from this segment detection. So this allows you to pull the results back in JSON format, which include the start, the end, the SMPTE time codes for start and end, and the duration of each of these components. So let's go through the components one by one. So black frames detection. So this is frame accurate detection of a sequence of black frames. And anyone in the media industry knows the Blender created open source movie Big Buck Bunny, which we're using here. This is an open source movie created from an organization called Blender Institute. What you see here is the segment to segment. It goes to a black frame. The API detects that in the exact amount of time the black frame lasts. Some of the use cases here are ad insertion. So one of the things that I've seen with the explosion of content is many pieces of production content have the markers for where to put an ad in. However, as catalogs are acquired and content that didn't intend to have an ad break is now made into content that has an ad break, or user-generated content, there's often not a good way to tell where to put an ad. So you have mid-sentence on a piece of content, an ad just drops in. Nothing's more frustrating than mid-word in a piece of content, an ad drops in. Also detecting scenes, removing the breaks, editing. There's a lot of use cases just to know when the black frames show up. End credits. Seems very simple enough, but the one of the more recent last 5-7 years is this concept of bingeability, and also when credits are rolling, even in broadcasts, you can actually add additional what's up next on the show, different types of end of program content. However, to do that, you need to know when the end credits start. So this is the concept of adding a skip to next episode. If you're creating something that's more bingeable, you can add that. It's worth noting that this is detecting the end credits. Opening credits are not detected, but when I get to the demo, we'll talk about a way that you could do that now with the feature that's already in Rekognition, which is the text and video capability. Shot detection. This is, again, seems simple enough, but it's the concept of different shots. So if you look at the upper left of the screen, and I'll show it in the demo later, you can see it's detecting each of the individual shots. This is a different open source movie, Tears of Steel, but it's able to tell when the shot changes happen. So this is frame accurate detection of the shot. This is good for creating clips, promo creation. Again, ad insertion could be another use case in between the different shots. Again, nothing is more annoying than when you miss a frame in this type of a marker. So you've got one part of the prior shot here. So that's why, again, the accuracy is very important on this type of an API. And then finally, the color bars. So this is the detection of these color bars. Again, hopefully you never see these, but this is something that's done when you're cleaning up to push something over to VOD. Find the start of the program content. There's a couple use cases for color bars detection. And that is the 4 API things in a nutshell.
Well, so I mean, some of those are super interesting to me. Like, I think the black frame, like the accuracy of all of them seems to be tantamount, right? This is not necessarily something that is impossible for people to do. They've been doing it for years, but there's the amount of work it takes to get close to the frame perfect answer, and then there's the amount of work it takes to get to that frame perfect answer. And like, I think that everyone can agree that that last little bit takes a significantly larger amount of time. So having an API that can do this in Rekognition video sounds super enticing.
Yeah, that was a great demo, Liam. I also just wanted to clarify one thing that I saw. So with respect to the API that does black frame detection for the big Buck Bunny clip, that one was detecting the first frame that was totally black, right? Because I noticed that the transition actually fades out from...
Correct, with no audio as well, because the idea here is to separate it from fades that are part of content. So it's specifically geared at looking for, it's not just looking for black frames, because honestly, you can actually do a lot of this with just math. Like pixel density will tell you, you can tell when it's a black frame. You don't really need a machine learning model to tell you that, but it's the intelligence of knowing that that is a different type of black frame. It's specifically distanced from just black bars on the screen, for instance.
Took the words right out of my mouth. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think, like, it's not quite like the API of media in terms of like how clips are put together, but if all these media workflows and pipelines operate on the assumption that the clip has to end with this sort of data packaging format of like this black frame, it's really important to be able to recognize them, especially when you're trying to clip together things for, let's say, advertisements or even just in producing a movie, right? You don't want to have excessive black frames. You want to make it behave as close to what you expect it to. So... Cool. Well, those are the 4 launches. I know that you have some other really cool stuff to show us. I don't know if we're gonna get into that right now. We have some other. Do you want to get into the MIE stuff, or do we want?
Yeah, very quick. Your call. I can get into that very quickly. I know we're probably a little shorter on time, but I think it's important to show the API in context of all the other APIs as well.
Well, so I think in the demo you're actually going to show us a little bit about what that flow looks like. So I guess before we segue into that, what if folks are to use this service to solve these problems with this new set of features, sort of how is that used to edit content? Like what is actually provided? You mentioned things like timestamps that are frame accurate. Can we talk a little bit about what users can expect before we show it to them in the demo?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you'll get back is a JSON document with all of the information, the start, the end, the duration. What you do with that actually depends on the use case. We'll talk about it in the demo, but one of the use cases is if you're using an edit suite, you would actually want to convert that information into something that's more palatable to Adobe Premiere or DaVinci Resolve or an edit suite, which is an EDL file or edit decision list. If you're using it for ad insertion, that would be a totally different use case. Now you've got the markers of where that is, so you can actually use something like Media Tailor if you're running this similar to how we do ads on Thursday Night Football. You could actually use Media Tailor to intelligently push the ad into that component. So the use cases depend on what you're doing. You could also just dump it all into an asset management system, so you have that information for other use cases for searchability of the content, that type of thing.
Awesome. Well, I don't want to hold you up too much. These are a lot of pieces of production software that I don't personally use all that often, but I have dabbled, and I'm excited to see the improvements with the new features from Rekognition Video. So we want to walk through what that looks like?
Sure. So yeah, I'm going to show two different demos. It's worth noting that both of the code for these demos are up on GitHub right now. There's actually one thing we've done a great job with at AWS Samples is a lot of different use cases showing the different ways you might use these APIs. What I'm showing here is something we call the Media Insights Engine, which is designed to take all of the different, actually I'll show the architecture of it really quickly. It's designed to take all of the different APIs you might need to process content and really make it easy to seamlessly run those APIs and store all of that information into a searchable state, which is in Elasticsearch here. So this is step functions. It handles a lot of the heavy lifting of processing an asset. So transcribe, Rekognition, which transcribe is our higher level speech to text service. They all have different things as far as file formats. So maybe your video isn't in the right file format, but we have Elemental Media Convert, which can actually make it into that right format. So this is a series of functions that are coordinated by step functions that actually process the video, run it through Rekognition, transcribe. If you want to translate it into another language, Amazon Translate, and then also for understanding of the what is spoken, comprehend. So I know that's a lot. I'm just going to get into the demo to show it.
We're going to get into the demo. So that's what we're looking at right here. This dashboard, this site, this application, that is the MIE, and it is an interface that AWS has open sourced in order to make it easier for folks to leverage the power of those APIs, but do it all through a GUI. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And the GUI is really potentially for just your own use, and then you could build another GUI on top of it. The idea of separating the kind of UX from the APIs is important here, because you might be using it for different use cases. But yeah, this is the architecture of the serverless website that I'm showing in Chrome here.
Yeah, and I don't want to spend too much time on me gushing about the MIE, but I work a lot with the various AWS AI services. I didn't even know about this, and so when Liam was showing me this, I was totally taken aback. I mean, this is like we'll see it in just a moment, but this is not only open source, but you can actually spin this up as a CloudFormation stack in your own AWS account. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's actually this and a couple others we'll talk about that are 10 minutes. You get an email with your information about how to log in, and you can begin processing content.
Awesome. Okay, I'll get out of your way. I know we're going to talk about the new Rekognition video features that we spoke about before, but that really blew me away when I saw that for the first time. I'm surprised I hadn't heard of it. So,
and I just want to plug a couple other ones. There's one that's specific to asset management called Media to Cloud as well. Again, the use case fits the problem, and that's where there's a lot of guidance on which fits where. If you're just looking for AI services, this is a great way to get your hands dirty with the AI services. This is actually just a UI built over the APIs. So we're hitting API gateway to get all this information from Elasticsearch. So what you see here is what I mentioned earlier, all of the different APIs people used historically to get intelligence from their content. Again, for years after Rekognition launched, you have all the objects. So this is down to a second level. What is in each scene? You can tell where each of these things hit in each scene. Another one that was very key for media and entertainment is the concept of looking for potentially unsafe content in your assets. So if you wanted to find any type of potentially moderated content, this really sped up that capability to find, suggestive nudity, suggestive weapon violence. It's something we've enhanced over the years, but it's been historically very key. Also, what words show up on the screen. Moving over into the language, audio language, the speech to text, you have the transcript of what is in here. Also, what key phrases, so you can actually really start to get some context from your data, from your assets. So what's being talked about, if it's people, dates, quantities. You can also adjust the confidence to really filter out the potentially inaccurate. I set my confidence to 90%. If you want to translate, Amazon Translate does a great job of translating into 54 pairs of languages. Now let's get to the new features. So we've added these two components of the segment detection API. So this gives you the start credits, the end credits. Sorry, not the start credits, the end credits. I'll talk about how to get the start credits here. So here you can see I clicked in, it jumps right to the end credits. You can find where the black frames are. Some way you could get the start credits, by the way. Again, that is not currently something that Rekognition does, but you have every word that's on the screen with the time that it was on the screen. So if you're wanting to create a start skip intro, for instance, we'll call it, that's something you could use with the other data Rekognition provides. You also get the information of every single shot that's in this piece of content. So shot by shot, you can see here what shot, where it starts, where it ends, and help to create promos and whatnot. So that's, go on.
I was going to say the shot one is one of the most impressive to me, because in a lot of the other ones, I feel like, we spoke before about how black frames could just be a little bit of math around like pixel density, make sure there's no audio, and the accuracy is highly important there. But something like shots is much more subjective. I feel like there's so much more room for human error there, and it's so much harder to automate if I were to think of that. Now, I'm not a media expert either, but I think that's something that probably takes a significant amount of time otherwise to have to handle.
Yeah, absolutely. One of our launch partners was A&E Networks, which had that same exact problem, which was how to package their content, create promos, whatnot. I have a demo specific to the new API if it makes sense to switch over to that. I just wanted to make sure everyone knew about the Media Insights engine. It will be it's up in GitHub. It's definitely something that we're actively developing, adding new features as they come out or customers suggest changes. We'd love to hear from you about it.
Awesome. Well, yeah, let's jump over to the other one.
So this is a demo specific to the segment detection or media analysis capabilities. So I'm going to switch gears now to more of a editing challenge. So now I'm no longer packaging, I'm no longer searching for content. I'm no longer looking at my assets. I now have a piece of content that I want to actually clip, create promos, maybe understand the asset from a shot level. So this is actually a film that we partnered with. This was led by the Hollywood Production Association, and it actually, let me log in. All backed by Cognito, by the way. So this is actually, and this is based on a different code base we have called the Media to Cloud, which is all about asset management. I want to focus on just the shot detection capability here. So this is something we worked with the Hollywood Professional Association on how to create a cinematic quality asset entirely in the cloud. So this is footage from cameras going directly into the cloud and then edited. But I wanted to go through an edit scenario that you might commonly see. So this is now also available in GitHub, which is the specific shot segment information and the technical cues. We talked about the technical cues, but I'll show it here because it actually does a good job at showing, like, here's the end credits. So you get just the end credits and also all the black frames. Moving over to the shots, that's actually way more complicated. So if you look up here, it's counting the shots one by one. You can actually see them as it changes. So this is a 14-minute short film. Let me go to one that actually has a lot of shot segments. So you can see it counting the shots as they add up throughout the clip. Now I want to go through how you might use that in a edit scenario. You can download this EDL. It's also worth noting if you actually have the JSON, we also added the feature that you can just convert the JSON into an edit decision list right here. This is actually helpful. You can use this code if you're automatically processing a piece of video. So this is all very UI driven. A lot of times you'll do this automatically as you upload a piece of content. So I just downloaded this edit decision list. I'm going to move over into Blackmagic's DaVinci Resolve, which is an edit platform. So you see the same exact piece of content here with all the different clips. However, what I don't have is all of the different shots, which is something I might need when editing this. So I can now import a timeline, bring in this edit decision list, which was generated from the segment detection API. And what I have here now is the same piece of content. However, now all of the bits are now very specifically cut up to where I can see exactly where the shots begin. You can actually see right here, shot by shot, accurate to the frame, how I might edit this piece of content.
That's really cool. I mean, that's like, I literally go through that process when I've done what limited video editing I have, and I just drop manual markers in, and Rekognition Video now does that automatically.
That's one of the benefits here. And again, this is just for API capabilities, but the goal is to really remove the undifferentiated heavy lifting when it comes to this. So the ask that I have is anything that challenges you with video, that's something to bring to us so we can see how we might do this.
Awesome. So again, if people want to recreate exactly what we just did, what are the reproduction steps here? They could go and download the MIE, or is the latest version of that demo that was focused on the newest features, are those features available yet as options in the MIE? I think you showed them before.
Yeah, they actually launched with the feature on Monday. So the latest, both the MIE and the shot detection demo, which is in GitHub as well, both of them support the latest features already. So really download the CloudFormation, deploy it, wait for your email, and then upload an asset is the steps.
Awesome.
It also seems to me that the MIE is just a great sample for how you can combine all these AI services to build a tool that can dramatically make your workloads more efficient.
That from my work with customers, that was the biggest challenge. Is Rekognition is a host of different APIs. Transcribe is a whole different set of APIs. Comprehend more APIs, and then think about if you want to actually add SageMaker in there. If you've built your own models, how do you do all of that in a way that then aggregates that information into one single location? That was really the goal behind the MIE, was to help you correlate all the different APIs together.
Yeah, and talking about undifferentiated heavy lifting, I'd imagine that every single production company that has to perform tasks like this may either contract out to a vendor or build some semblance of this in-house if they process enough video. And it's the experience is more than the sum of the parts, right? It's more than just the ability to extract all these insights. It's the fact that you can do it all in one place in a very easy to use GUI that you've shown us right here. It's some really cool stuff, really slick.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the hope, and they are doing it both through vendors and internally. It's a mix of everything, but yeah, it's definitely one of the most expensive parts of content production, I would say, is dealing with a lot of this manual effort.
Awesome. Well, in the chat on both Twitch and LinkedIn, I see we have some links in there for both the documentation for the segment detection API, as well as the getting access to the MIE. Spin that up again in your own account and get started with it. And anyone else have any questions before we sort of close out on this section for Liam? While I'm waiting for other questions, I have one of my own. I'm really impressed that we had parity with, so quickly with this newest launch from Rekognition Video, and seeing that reflected in the MIE as an open source code sample. Is that something we can expect customers to see with future features as well? Do we continue to keep supporting the MIE in that same way?
I would say yes. I mean, one thing I would say is we have a lot of really sharp, dedicated people working on it, and actually a growing community out in the wild as well. Thanks to some very, very good, quick developers. Not even the media analysis capabilities. About a couple months ago, we launched the capability to do text and video. 7 hours from when I said, hey, that would be cool to have it in MIE, there was at least a fork of it that had it. It wasn't pushed till a couple days later, but that was very impressive, where I was like, hey, we launched text in video, that would be cool. And literally hours later, they were like, here's this. So that's some of the benefit of the kind of open source project, and some of the benefit of just like, we are very active on both the Media to Cloud and the MIE on reacting to the pull requests and the issues in GitHub. So I would say yes. That's the hope. It's also pretty easy to understand, so you can actually build it yourself if we didn't build it for you right away.
Yeah, or modify it to serve other workflows for your organization and just use it as is. Make your own fork of it. That's
actually one of the modifications we've seen recently is ad break detection. That's actually a pretty cool fork of that was specific to that one use case. So. Video transcribing for subtitles is another one that we have a really good fork up in GitHub right now, where you can actually run your content through and actually provides a kind of a dashboard to fix the subtitles and generate the SRT or web VTT files as well.
Yeah,
there's a lot up there. So too much to talk about today, probably.
Well, I mean, it seems like this is a great launch pad for playing around with the different capabilities, building a custom platform, and just having a tool on hand to really reduce the undifferentiated heavy lifting. That word can be hard to say sometimes, but we love saying it. I'm just still amazed by how when we see these kinds of AI services combined, how they really are more than the sum of the parts. Right, because you use them all in isolation. Let's say, okay, well, we've done audio, extracting speech from audio files. We've done translation before. We've done image detection before. We've done labeling before, but it just really brings it all together in one place.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the key messages I would get out through this session. Is a lot of times the most interesting thing to find, like for instance, if you're looking for something in a piece of content, like the news, for instance. Maybe the audio is the right way. You really need to think about the problem from a machine learning perspective and decouple it into the exact things that make it easier. Like I often say, use the thing that makes it easiest to find the what you're looking for. Score, like in sports, for instance, looking for hockey like scores, you could train a model to understand what that looks like of the puck going through the net, which is a very challenging machine learning model. Or you could actually do text detection on the scoreboard, which shows you each shot that was attempted. Using all of the different tools at your disposal is definitely the right way if you merge all the data together.
Awesome. Well, some great insights to close out on. Use the right tool for the right job, but also solve the problem in the easiest way possible. Don't give yourself more work than is necessary.
Yep.
Some wise words. Well, Liam, thank you again for joining us. We have one more session lined up for a demo, and it is Solutions Constructs. Very exciting stuff and recent development with the CDK, but just sit tight. We'll be back in a moment. We'll be talking more about it. All right, hang tight, everyone. Be right back. All right, we're up for launch 3 of 3 in today's episode of AWS What's Next. Here to tell us a little bit more about Solutions Constructs is Ryan Hayes, Solutions Builder here at AWS. Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Yep, thanks, Nick. Thanks, Robert, for having us today. Really appreciate the time, and looking forward to telling people about what we just came out with here.
Awesome. Well, there's lots of solutions in AWS. We're big on solutions, right? We've got solutions architecture. We've got solutions architects that help people solve that. We're launching Solutions Constructs today. And when I think of the word constructs, it rings a bell with CDK constructs, right? So am I putting the pieces together the right way? What are Solutions Constructs?
Yeah, so Solutions Constructs is an open source library of well-architected patterns that extends the AWS Cloud Development Kit, or CDK, like you mentioned. And for folks who aren't too familiar with that, thinking about it in the infrastructure rainforest, if you will, On the ground level, we have the cloud formation that we all know and love in JSON and YAML formats. And then kind of moving up, we have the CDK, which kind of provides a level of abstraction above that, lets you programmatically define parts of your infrastructure using programming languages that you're familiar with. And then, on top of that is where AWS Solutions Constructs come in. It's gonna, these are reusable higher level groupings of CDK constructs. And we also, ship them pre-baked with AWS best practice defaults. And this is really so that developers can focus on building their applications. And meanwhile, we'll take care of making sure that it's up to par with the architecture and security standards or, best practices on the foundational level. Yeah.
Now I understand that one of the principles behind the CDK was that we wanted to meet developers where they are. So maybe they're comfortable in a particular IDE, they like using a particular language, or simply that they prefer the imperative style of infrastructure as code versus the declarative style that you have with YAML or JSON. Given that, maybe can you give us a little bit of background? What was the light bulb moment when you went, yes, this is what the customer needs here is solutions construct?
Yeah. So I mean, going back to that whole kind of comparison between the three kind of infrastructure as code options that we now have, AWS, right? So like when you're writing out an application or the infrastructure for an application, and let's say you're doing CloudFormation, that can get kind of long. Obviously, we have some ways to mitigate, readability and kind of the size of those stacks. But when you're dealing with large production size or enterprise grade applications, you could be dealing with thousands of lines of YAML or JSON, stuff like that. And so the aha moment for me personally was going through spinning up a project, even for the demo that I just put together that we'll be looking at in a little bit, is when you go through and you have your 100 or so lines of TypeScript code and you hit the CDK synth command and it spits out thousands of lines of CloudFormation, you really start to see the value there, both in terms of the amount of technical overhead that you're working with and kind of keeping things fresh on the team in terms of like the code that you're working with. But just, everything's so much cleaner. It's a great, thing to work with, and it's awesome to have everything kind of in the same IDE.
But so I just kind of dived a little deeper into that. You mentioned that you can write something like 100 lines of TypeScript that'll generate thousands of lines of CloudFormation. Does that then imply that you're operating at a consistent level of abstraction, or is the intention that you can kind of switch down and operate at either level whenever you choose?
Yeah, that's a great point. So the one thing that we want to emphasize is, you can use AWS Solutions Constructs and AWS CDK constructs, seamlessly in the same project. So when we're speaking in terms of like how much code are you saving using AWS Solutions Constructs, it's really a kind of a harmony between that and the CDK. So what we really want to message out is by grouping together these CDK constructs that you could be using to, kind of whittle down this CloudFormation template that you might have, that's helping you further reduce the code that you're working with, because instead of defining out each of those constructs that you might have to do multiple times depending on what your team's working on, you can have one go-to pattern that will envelop those and save you a little bit more coding and time on top of the great advantages that the CDK already offers.
So when I think about who's going to be most excited about this, I'm thinking if I'm trying to rapidly prototype something, again, I have this idea of a few different pieces of AWS infrastructure that I want to string together. I don't want to go and write thousands of lines of CloudFormation. If I could just sort of imperatively define that using the CDK, that may be a bit quicker. Also, let's say maybe I have this huge application I'm trying to migrate, right? Like maybe if I'm starting from scratch, it will be easier to define all of that infrastructure that I already know very well using something like these solution constructs. And in an effort to tie them together, using solutions constructs essentially is going to give me a lot of peace of mind that I'm abiding by best practices for those various CDK constructs, as opposed to me sort of stringing them all together myself. Is that sort of the right wavelength here?
Yeah, so exactly. So when I say we wrap up the CDK constructs and everything, we also include some prescriptive defaults so that the user doesn't have to worry too much, depending on the use case, of course, with some of the things like security, right out of the gate. They can really get started with building their application and move quickly in that respect and get to a prototype. We try to include enough prescriptive defaults to the point where it's going to kind of give that foundation, but also so that it's not overwhelming. And the other thing that we do is we allow the user to override those defaults as well. If something's just not working out, they can go in and obviously put in defaults or settings rather that work best for their business case. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, I think, but that's really what we're shooting for there is a little bit of harmony between getting the developer up and running, being able to do rapid prototypes, demos, even anything up to just an actual production application, getting them to that point quicker and making them or enabling them to deliver faster.
Yeah, so in terms of level of abstraction, you mentioned that this is one level higher essentially than the CDK because it produces CDK code in the end, essentially. But let's make this a little more tangible, right? Like, what does the developer experience look like to use this then? We talked about it being directly in where you would write CDK code traditionally, but is this available for all languages? Does it have parity with the languages that the CDK supports? What does it look like as a developer? If I wanted to string together service A and service B, how would I get started doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nick. And one of the things that we'll touch on exactly that in the demo too, but on the high level, you can expect the same developer experience as you would with the CDK. We support TypeScript, Python, Java, C# is coming. That's a language that the CDK currently supports, so we're working towards that as well. But really, if you want to spin up a project, it's pretty much as simple as you can do a CDK init, for instance, that'll spit out an entire, baseline project for you to start working with. But you can really just start with a project folder, install and import the patterns that you'd like to use from your favorite package manager like NPM, PyPy, Maven, and then just declare it and configure any properties just as you would with any kind of normal application. It's, for a lot of use cases, we find that can just be one TypeScript file. And so it makes everything nice and contained. And then really from that point, once your project's in a good state, you can either deploy it out directly to your AWS account and either start using it directly or do some integration testing with it. Or you can synthesize it into a CloudFormation template with source code package on the side if that's applicable, if you want to distribute it out to a team or for customers to use. So,
well, now that you put it that way, I'm very excited to see. I understand we have a demo, but before we dive into that, I noticed a couple of really good questions coming across in LinkedIn chat. Let me just replay those for you, if that's all right.
Sure.
So one of these questions is to do with how we evolve the solution construct, the library of solution constructs. So is there a way for the user community to feed enhancement requests back and to share their experiences? I think what this is also getting at is, like, let's say a customer has had a particular problem with that has resulted in a reusable solution of some sort. Can they commit that or propose that?
Yeah, so we launched this past Monday. We currently have all of our code up on GitHub for everyone to see. The real intention here is we want to treat it like a real open source project. So in terms of, I guess community contributions is the best way to put it. We encourage everyone to work with a project as they would a normal open source project. So if there's an issue, a bug, or something like that, they can handle that through issues on GitHub. And then if they have a pattern or even just a bug fix or something kind of in between those two lines, we could handle it with the pull requests. So that's kind of what we envision. We invite everyone to kind of take the library apart and help us make it better together. And we invite kind of everyone to contribute to that evolving process and really make it something that helps a lot of developers out.
Awesome. And Christopher Dunn from AO.com asks, are solutions constructs like packages for the CDK?
Yeah, you could kind of think of it that way. I mean, so you're at the end of the day, when you're working with them, right, you're going to do an npm install. Let's say you need a Lambda to S3 kind of interaction. You'll do npm install, the namespace, and then AWS Lambda to S3, and then you just bring it into your TypeScript file if that's what you're working with. And it's very just declarative, package-like kind of user interface there.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions for now. Should we dive into the demo?
Sounds good to me. Let me go ahead and share my screen over here. Okay. So today what we'll be talking about, and as Nick touched on a little bit earlier, we'll be kind of walking through what it's like to build a solution using AWS Solutions Constructs. And the important thing to note here is we'll also be sprinkling in a little bit of CDK as well. So we'll get kind of the best of both worlds there in terms of how this all kind of comes together for the developer. And so the example that we'll be using today is serverless image handler architecture. And this is an existing solution that our team has available on aws.amazon.com/solutions. Basically what it does is it's in the form of a CloudFormation template, and it gives you a image handler API that you can hook up to a web or mobile application that will deliver back optimized images for the device that the customer is using. So an example would be if you have, 4,000 by 4,000 pixel original image, you don't want to be sending that to somebody's, iPhone. It's too big. You're not going to get a good benefit out of it. So the idea here is you keep those original images in the S3 bucket that the solution provisions for you, and then the web or mobile application will make requests based on kind of the viewport sizing or application sizing that it detects, and the Lambda function will deliver back an optimized image through that API and through the CloudFront distro. Interesting thing here too, to save the customer a little bit more money, is that the CloudFront distribution acts as a caching layer. So you only have to make that request once. And not that, handling stuff through Lambda is particularly expensive on a 1 or 2 time run per day. But, over the course of, a lot of requests and, enterprise scale application, it could get a little expensive. So it's just one little extra thing that we do to save the customer money there with the existing implementation that we have. But we'll be using this for today. It's a 4-service architecture, as you can see. We've got that CloudFront, API gateway, Lambda, and S3 that we'll be provisioning. And so, like I said, this is the existing implementation. When we're thinking about, how to build this in terms of patterns, what's the best first step? And so the easiest way to go about this is, let's look at the Solutions Constructs library and try to take this apart. And so right now we have about 23 or so, 25 patterns that we can pick from. We're kind of going to put a puzzle together from this. So we'll pick the patterns that we can kind of build this same architecture with using the least amount of work. And so that just so happens to be the CloudFront to API to Lambda pattern that we have, and the Lambda to S3 pattern that's in the library. And depending on the text size here, you might ask, why can't you use the AWS CloudFront to API gateway pattern itself and do some other combination? Really, the goal that we're trying to focus on here is just doing the least amount of code necessary to get us to a viable kind of POC or product here. So these 2 patterns are going to get us there.
Yeah, and to make that very direct, like traditionally, if you were to try to represent this application directly through the CDK, you would have to tie each of those 4 individual pieces of infrastructure together. So you're talking about, let's say, 4 arbitrary units of code, right? Whereas now we have these bigger Lego or bricks or puzzle pieces or whatever you want to call them, and you only have to tie 2 of them together, and you have the understanding that all of those interconnected entities within the start and end of that block are done in a well-architected manner.
Yeah, that's a great point, Nick. You took the words right out of my mouth at that. It's all about, minimizing the amount of CDK constructs that you're putting together, and, just saving even more resources in terms of fleshing out your solution. So yeah, great point there. But working through the demo, right? So we're going to take it, end to end here. We're going to get set up with our project environment. So if we were to open a command line, right now, first thing we would do if we don't already have this done is do a quick npm global install of the AWS CDK, because that's what we'll need to do kind of deployment work, and we'll need to be running the CDK to get the benefits of solutions constructs. So if you already have that installed, that's great. We will skip to the next step, and that's to just on the low level create our project folder. So we'll add a folder to our desktop or wherever we're running this, and then we'll jump into it using the cd command. And then finally, what we're going to do is we're going to run the CDK init command. And that, I touched on it just a little bit earlier, but what that does is it deploys a kind of default or baseline project structure into the location that you just specified in a given language. So for this case, we'll be using TypeScript, and that will give you, your default stack. It'll even give you a kind of empty unit test case to get started with unit testing and integration testing. So really good resource to use when you're doing a clean sheet design for your solution. So like I said, this is the expected outcome for that. You can see on the left-hand side, it'll give you some output in terms of useful commands that you can work with while building your project. Everything from building to deployment is listed out there for you. And then on the right-hand side, you see that default project structure.
Sorry for interrupting. I have a so my chroma key green filter is messing up with your green text on the content. So you mentioned that these are some of the useful commands you can run. I'll just read them off. So there's npm run build, npm run watch, run test, and then cdk deploy, cdk diff, and cdk synth. Yeah.
There's a lot of green in this. Beware. No,
that's on my side. It's all good.
Worries. Yeah, that's hilarious. Cool. Yeah, so we're all teed up to start building this. Let's jump right in. So like we mentioned from the chat, right, we're going to need to install a couple of packages. So first things first, we're going to bring in a few AWS CDK packages for API Gateway and Lambda. And basically the reason why we're doing this is because we'll need to configure a couple of things with those two resources beyond the scope of what the patterns offer. If you're just using default configuration, and if your architecture allows it, you don't need to do this, but this is for this given use case. And then next up, we'll bring in those AWS Solutions Constructs packages that we showed in the previous slide. So we have our CloudFront API Gateway to Lambda as the first, and then our Lambda to S3 pattern coming in second. And that takes us through the install. So getting started with the build, referencing back that project structure that we just took a look at, in the lib folder, we see a solution name -stack.ts file. This is where the majority of our solution logic is going to sit. And when we talked about like that one TypeScript file that we use for everything, this is really going to be it. So we'll go ahead and flesh this out, starting with the imports and globals. We'll put those to work. Then we'll define some parameters for our solution, and then we'll actually move forward with putting in the business logic for it. All right, so in kind of a block coding example here, we can see all of the work that we need to do, and it's still only 53 lines to get us, from point A to point B. So we'll start with the imports for this solution. We'll bring in those CDK packages that we just installed, and then next up, we'll call those AWS Solutions Construct patterns that we also installed in the previous step. Moving down into the class, we're going to just define some global variables to keep track of resources, because we'll need to call back like bucket names and things like that. So it's good to keep track of those. And then next step we have is we're going to start to flesh out our parameters. And so anyone who's familiar with, CloudFormation at the low level, and then even just AWS Solutions, knows that, you're going to need to be taking some inputs from the user to determine how the deployment goes, or, certain features, whether to turn them on and off, stuff like that. So for this solution, what we're going to be kind of trying to collect information on is around, how the customer wants the API to function. So unveiling that part, we're going to be mostly dealing with just cross-origin resource sharing, because that's a big deal when it comes to having a API out there. So we're going to ask the customer, do you want to have this enabled, true or false? Depending on their use case, they'll pick that. And then if they selected true for the second parameter, we'll ask them to specify an origin for the API to whitelist in the header. And they can also specify the wildcard, which will let it kind of loose into the wild so anybody can use it. And so that shores up our parameters and we have our inputs. Now we're ready to start actually building in those patterns and constructs that we talked about. So now that we're building, we're in the blue. So first thing we're going to do is set up our Lambda function. That's a key component of this solution. It's going to be doing all the editing of the images. We want to specify the runtime here, where the source code for that Lambda function is going to sit, as well as some environment variables. So you can see here that we tie back those parameter values to the environment variables here. And then Lambda function will hold on to those and call them as they need and determine the behavior in terms of, returning the image and the headers to set. So we've got that set up. We'll add a little bit of magic to the API, nothing too crazy, but we want to specify binary media types here to make sure that, the API doesn't get confused in terms of the content that it's serving back. We're going to be serving back images as binary files, so we need to specify that. And then really where we start to take off is we're going to implement that first pattern, which is going to be the CloudFront to API gateway to Lambda pattern. And as you can see here, it takes about 4 or 5 lines of code. All we have to do is go ahead and declare it in our TypeScript file and say, we want to deploy the Lambda function, pass in those Lambda function properties, and then pass in the API property that we put in a couple lines above. And the second pattern is going to be that Lambda to S3. And the interesting thing to note here, right, is so we have these 2 patterns, both kind of with joining points on that Lambda function. So what we allow our customers to do is switch on and off kind of those end caps of the pattern, depending on the pattern itself. But in this case, we're able to turn off the Lambda function from deploying from the second pattern and pull in the Lambda function from the first pattern so that we can tie those together and have it work in harmony. And then last thing, we'll just add some bucket permissions to that pattern. And then the finishing touches will be tying together the source buckets that the Lambda is going to be looking for in its whitelist to grab images from. So as you can see here, 53 lines of TypeScript, very readable. It's a great way to define infrastructure, and it shows that nice harmony between solution constructs as well as CDK logic as well. So everything works together really nicely there. So moving right along.
Absolutely love it. If you can just go back to the previous slide for one moment.
Yep, sure thing.
I just want to gush over how beautiful this looks because, I mean, there's a time and place. We like to say right tool for the job, but I think one of the things that really impresses me about the CDK is the fact that there's just some things that as much as we might like declarative programming styles, sometimes there's nothing that can really quite replace the clarity of doing it imperatively. And not only that, I mean, one thing I want to point out here, and we didn't use this here, but this imperative style is also much more conducive to conditional branching, right? So you can imagine like when you take a parameter input, like whether CORS is enabled, that maybe you have a slightly different infrastructure. And we can do that here, and we can continue to reassemble these building blocks that you've been demonstrating.
Yeah, definitely. I know for one of my personal favorite things about this kind of shift over to the programmatic, defining infrastructure this way is that, as somebody who worked very in depth with CloudFormation and some of those other kind of like, I don't want to say markdown, driven languages, but, they're set up like that using JSON as an example. Even just, as somebody trying to onboard as a new developer, it's very kind of overwhelming to read through and get a good grasp on where the information's going throughout the solution. You can be having those ref tags and everything all over the place. So this is just really nice way of cleaning everything up and making it readable kind of to the masses. And that's another great point too. I mean, it makes it, from what we've kind of seen, is it makes it very approachable from an open sourcing perspective as well. So great, example here is if you build a solution, it kind of inherently is extensible, right? So you could, use that as part of a bigger solution because it's kind of all just levels of abstraction. So you could kind of open source what you build, and it's very approachable to the open source community, and yeah, just really nice overall.
Yeah, and just to riff on that, I mean, that's kind of the other advantage of having really concise infrastructure as code is that, you probably all heard the term, code is written to be read and incidentally to be executed. And I think we really have to take into consideration when this is how we define production infrastructure. This is itself a living document designed to be read, right? And the more clearly it communicates the underlying intent, the better off we all are. Because let's say you wrote one of these and I'm reviewing it. If the intention of the review is for me to catch errors, like, hey, is this thing actually correctly configured? Does this have minimally scoped permissions? It's much easier for me to do that in a concise way, rather than kind of what you were referring to, which is if I have if this is going to, I hope we're going to get a chance to look at the resulting CloudFormation doc, and we can let the viewer decide for themselves which one would you rather review, right? So I think that's another interesting element to what this enables.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that it's an underrated sort of optimization, right? Like, I know we all talk about readability but like trying to understand something like intent here is extremely important. I mean, also if your architecture is going to evolve over time, you don't want to go into that 1,000-line sheet of CloudFormation and make all your edits directly in line there. Like, that's going to be a nightmare. Now, some people may have preference or may be very familiar with that, but I think that, like, if we're talking about pure efficiency here, the ability to simply change a few lines or add just a few lines to an existing, here we have a TypeScript file or script essentially that's just going to run, and we can add or modify those at a single line, and that will do all the downstream changes when it synthesizes the resulting CloudFormation code. So exciting stuff.
Yeah, I think that the other great point, so we touched on, prescriptive defaults. Kind of with any level of abstraction, you're going to have a little bit of, stuff kind of sitting under the hood. And I think that the workflow here, Robert, you mentioned doing like code reviews and stuff like that. I think that the way that it's set up is, even if you had to override a best practice property or something like that, you're going to see it in the TypeScript file. So, I mean, everything's spelled out here, and it's, it's all right in front of you. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's another great kind of add-on benefit for a lot of development teams there, is they can see in plain sight what's being overridden in terms of the prescriptive guidance that we're delivering, and just have all the cards on the table right there.
So we've got one question from a very patient viewer in Twitch chat. Werner G is wondering, are there any plans to integrate this or offer implementations with something like Terraform? I understand that, CDK built on top of CloudFormation, and above the CDK now we have Solutions Constructs. Is there, to your understanding, any sort of plans to implement lower level primitives that something like a Solutions Construct would work with or integrate with?
I mean, that's a great question. And I think that, like, we love to hear kind of the customer feedback around what they're looking for. So I think that, like you said, we are pretty tied in with the CDK. But depending on what our options are kind of moving forward, that, we're always happy to develop things that help the customer, reduce the amount of code that they're working with and all that good stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I think in terms of short-term roadmap, that's not immediately on there, but I think that that would be something cool to kind of see down the road, longer term, definitely.
Awesome.
So we'll go ahead and finish this build out. If there's no other questions, Nick, do you have anything else there, or?
No, green light. Yeah, keep going.
Awesome. Okay, so we have all of this beautiful infrastructure here. Now what we're going to do is, so we talked about setting up that Lambda function. We need to actually provide the source code for that. And you can see here kind of on line 27, we specify where that's going to be sitting in respect to our project. So, oops, get my mouse set up here. So all we have to do is drag and drop that source code folder into where the Lambda function is expecting to find it. And then the CDK takes care of packaging that all up when it comes time to deploy. Granted, if you are building a solution from scratch, you'll have to actually build the code in there or build it separately and then merge it in. But really easy to reference between the, where the source code is sitting and tying it up with the Lambda function that's going to be consuming it.
Yeah. It occurs to me that we can, with this kind of recipe, we can have, we've talked a long time about how there's usually these impedance mismatches where you have to write the front end in JavaScript and the back end is in Perl or PHP or what have you. With the rise of Node.js, we've seen a lot more JavaScript backends, but now we have the trifecta. We have the front end, back end, and infrastructure all in a single language, right? And not necessarily JavaScript. You can do this with C#, and then I understand C# support is coming to the CDK contracts eventually as well. But that's just really cool.
Yeah, we love having it. Like I said, everything in the same IDE. Just it's so much nicer that way. Quick question for Nick and Robert. Can you see the face tiles on the side of the screen there? Should I minimize that, or just want to make sure you can see the whole slide?
Oh no, you're good. You're good. Looks good on our end. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Yeah. So that brings us to the fourth and final step of our solutions development journey, which is you have two options, right? So our solution's ready for testing or deployment, depending on what stage you're in. We can either run CDK deploy or CDK synth on it to kind of take it further. CDK deploy will deploy that stack that you just created into your account using CloudFormation. You don't really see it too much, but it's basically just pushing a CloudFormation stack or a change set if you already have something up there into your account, and it's provisioning those resources for you. And then on the flip side, we have CDK synth, which will do the local CloudFormation packaging for you. It'll bundle up your template, and it'll also bundle up any source code associated with it, so that you have a nice distributable kind of set of artifacts to either pass on to other people or kind of productize even. So that's really the final step there. And then moving ahead. So Nick, I know you wanted to see the ending JSON template. I really tried. I couldn't squeeze it into the slide in a way that would be attractive enough for presentation use, but I did count the line numbers. So like I said, we have 53 lines of AWS Solutions Constructs and CDK code working in Harmony in TypeScript. That translates, using kind of a similar approach with, just defining everything as CDK constructs. It's about 215 lines, depending on how you choose to do that, all the setup and everything. And then that also brings us up to 1038. I think that's the number there. 1038 lines of JSON. So as you can see, the difference between the JSON and the CDK is massive. But then when you bring in the solutions constructs, it takes us just that extra mile where we can really, keep whittling down and making our code a lot more manageable from the kind of original JSON and YAML formats that we're used to seeing.
Yeah,
after seeing numbers like these, it's no wonder why there's so much interest and support for the CDK. And I think the fact that the solution construct just furthers that trend is the right path for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I'm gonna reference Richard Boyd, who was on our show presenting Code Artifact a few weeks back. But he had a tweet the other day where he said something along the lines of he had created this new solution and it had a similar value proposition that it reduced the work from this big amount to this smaller amount. And the first question he got when someone saw it was like, well, why isn't it one? Why isn't it only one step? Why is it not only one line of code? And it's like, hey, I'll take those questions every day, right? Like we'll grapple with the hard problems of how we can try and make that possible. But in the meantime, I think it is nice to look back and see what was yesterday and what is possible today, with solutions constructs. So some very exciting numbers there. I was a math major in college. I see numbers, I see graphs. You're barking up the right tree.
Excellent. Yeah, that. Like I said, that's what I personally love about working with the frameworks, and it's really nice to have everything clear, concise, readable for everyone involved. So huge benefit there.
But on the flip side, this is not so good for you if you work at a company that measures your output by lines of code.
Yeah. Now we need to figure out some new metrics, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you'll have that. It's all a zero-sum game or whatever they call it.
This actually, you know what? I take that back. You know what you can do? You can just run CDK synth and check in the CloudFormation template and get the credit for just writing far fewer lines of code.
There you go, Rob. That's malicious compliance at its best.
Oh no, come on! I don't need malicious compliance. Who knows you're running it?
Value driven.
Yes.
Work smarter, not harder is the mantra. But, just wrapping up here. So the key takeaways really, we export all of these really well. But for the customer, really of any kind of, if you're, super technical and you love your infrastructure versus if you're someone just kind of spinning up and kind of entering the world and doing smaller scale projects, super low barriers to entry. We talked about faster development, easy maintenance, onboarding comes with that. If you're starting up a new team or bringing on new resources, very easy to get them up to speed with the stuff you've been working on. Reusable code, you can extend the solutions that you write infinitely, use them as part of kind of bigger pieces to bigger puzzles, if you will. And then the testing is one thing that I just love so much about working with these frameworks is, CloudFormation and kind of those lower level products don't really give you a lot of opportunity to do automated testing on the resources that you're provisioning or kind of what to expect out of a stack. You can really start to bake that in with the CDK. We love to kind of have that extra level of assurance as we're developing applications and infrastructure. It's really nice to have an extra little checkbox as we're running through the pipeline there. Super easy to create well-architected applications. Like we mentioned, everything comes with AWS best practice defaults, which you can of course override if they get in your way. And then frictionless ramp up. So, I mean, everything in the same IDE, no new languages or anything to learn, and write everything. And as you mentioned, Robert, the trifecta there of JavaScript, if you're a Node.js developer, have everything in one language. So
music to my ears.
Yep. Definitely. I think that's all I got demo wise for everyone today. Like I said, we just released out on Monday with the GA version. So we've got our GitHub up there. We love everyone to we encourage everyone in the community to go up there, take everything apart. If you see anything, PRs, issues, we're always on there. So yeah, definitely super excited to hear feedback from the community and customers to make this a great product. Keep iterating on it.
Yeah, and Ryan, I know it should kind of go without saying, given that the GitHub link is right there. We've mentioned it's open source. We've showed it off, but some people were asking earlier in the stream, how much does this cost? Like, I like the efficiency here, but what's it going to cost me? And I know I joked the other day, but it sounds like it's the nice low cost of free 99, right? It's absolutely free. You go into GitHub, you clone it yourself, and go to town, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly. I love that saying too. Yeah, it's similar to the CDK. It's totally free to pull down, play with. You only pay for the services that you provision once you spin that up into the cloud. So that's the pricing model there, if you will.
Awesome. Well, usually we end on how you get started, but you so graciously did that for us. We've had lots of questions along the way. We've got them answered. Someone was wondering what your IDE was before. I'm pretty sure it was Visual Studio Code, right?
Yep, Visual Studio.
Cool. And one last statement. We were joking before about lines of code as a performance metric. Werner putting it very eloquently. It's all about time to value, right? That should be the important metric, whether you're delivering software or beyond. making that more effective, I think, is something that would be a continuity across all AWS services. Reduce the time to value. So, awesome. Well, Ryan, I know third up on the day today, but you were a trooper and you stuck in there, and the demo is awesome. I'm excited to start using Solutions Constructs. So you may have covered this before, but how many are available currently?
We have about 25 out there right now, getting started. So like I said, the goal was to keep kind of building that out, using kind of what we're seeing internally as, commonly used interactions. We have a good kind of gauge of that, as well as, whatever the customers are saying in terms of, a lot of people say we need a certain kind of grouping of constructs. We'll be more than happy to either build it or, work together to achieve that. So, yeah, we're really excited about it, and love to hear the feedback on it.
Awesome. Yeah, so to get started,
an idea occurs to me. We usually do that silly segment at the end where we try to combine all of the service announcements and the demos into one thing. Since Ryan's been such an awesome sport and has gone last here, Ryan, if you're game for this, you want to join us for this silly little exercise at the end of every episode?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, Nick, you want to set it up?
All right, yeah. Ryan, while I'm setting up the rules, just stop sharing your screen and I'll switch the overlay over. But yeah, so the rules of engagement here are simple. Every episode, we go and we look at each of the 3 launches we've had, or the number of launches, because sometimes it's not 3, and we try to think of the customer whose dream episode this would be. Like, oh, I'm going to go build an application that uses A and B and C, and you have to come up with some way to string them together. So it's a little bit of an interesting game, but let's just recap again for everyone who's tuning back in now, and it's been a long episode. So we had Honeycode. So a no-code solution to building applications from end to end with permissioning and, nice and simple no-code solution tool. Second, we had new media analysis features for Rekognition video. So things like black bar detection, figuring out where we want to inject ads, stuff like that. And then here we have Solutions Constructs. So, Rob, I don't know how you want to do this. Maybe I feel bad making Ryan go first unless he wants to do something with Solutions Constructs.
Yeah.
That would just be cruel.
You don't even have to go first. I think it was just, we don't want to put you on the spot here. It is, but if you want to think of it, the approach is kind of like, what if these were the secret ingredients and you're the Iron Chef?
Yeah. So are we talking about target audience here, or what's the?
We're saying, you're building a startup and you got to use all 3 of these, or just a pet project or something like that. And I've got a burning one. So if you wanted some time to think about it, I can go first.
I think I've got a. Let me just.
Yeah. Hit us with it.
All right. So, here we go. Since the recognition this is going to be a very media driven go, but I think since this is a common platform these days, all the cool kids are using it. TikTok success self-service consulting type of optimization, I think, is a good one. You can use your Honeycode to build up a little kind of tracking app, and then use your Rekognition to tear apart your videos, and then I think it was mentioned earlier, actually packaging some of the Rekognition stuff and the media stuff into a CloudFormation template, so we can take it full circle on the infrastructure side with Solutions Constructs.
You just stole the wind right out of my sails. Yeah, I mean that's awesome, right? I mean, I think the connection between the media interface engine, was it? I'm misremembering the acronym.
That sounds right.
MIE, yeah.
The MIE, right? Because that's basically a giant cloud. I mean, I don't want to undersell it, but part of it certainly is a CloudFormation template that shows how you can combine all the different AI services to produce this kind of end-to-end media analysis and editing tool. And one of the natural opportunities there, it seems to me, is to take Solutions Constructs and turn that into something much more concise, something much easier to hack and to review and that sort of thing. So there's a natural alignment there between the media tools that we talked about today with Rekognition, segmentation, and Solutions Constructs. Now, with respect to Honeycode, now we have to pop up a layer and talk about the application, because Honeycode is kind of out there, right? It is not tightly integrated with all these different AWS services yet. But so if the artifact of that is some sort of video production pipeline, we can share that with the team through Honeycode. And not everybody has to be technically savvy enough to build one of these applications, but they can all see, hey, we have to edit 20 videos by 2,000 videos by the end of the month. How are we going to do this? What's the status of each one, right?
Yeah, or like idea management, they're all purpose-driven videos. So, I could see the use case for it. It does make it difficult because it's outside of the CloudFormation realm. So but I think we could make it happen.
Yeah, I think another approach I was going to take over on the combination of MIE and Solutions Constructs was we mentioned a lot about how there are folks that are forking the MIE and then writing their own features for their business use cases. And so something that appears to me is like, well, if the Solution Construct is going to eventually compile down into, CloudFormation template code, you can create those snippets and essentially, even if you don't port the entire MIE into Solutions Constructs and CDK, you could use that to rapidly prototype new features that will then interface with what is the CloudFormation based MIE. So a little bit about best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Love it.
Well, thanks for being a good sport, Ryan. I know we put you on the spot there, and you nailed it. You came up with an awesome idea.
Definitely.
Yeah, Nick and Rob, I can't thank you enough for the time today. And for everyone out there watching, definitely check out the GitHub, and love to see your contributions, ideas, feedback. Keep iterating on it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ryan. This is going to do it for us on episode 6. Is it 6, Rob? Yeah.
Yep.
Episode 6 of AWS What's Next. Again, covered 3 really exciting launches. Just did the fun little ending segment there where we string them all together. But again, Honeycode, video meta-analysis features for Rekognition video, and Solutions Constructs here. So 3 very different types of launches. Again, we're very excited by them, and we're very thankful for the service team members that tuned in, or rather joined us on the stream to show those off and show off those demos. Again, many of these first looks in demo form, often accompanying blog posts and some other promotional videos. But wanted to give another big shout out to everyone in the audience who's tuning in from both LinkedIn and on Twitch.tv. Thank you again for getting your questions in. We appreciate it immensely. We've been throwing links all throughout the way in chat, so if you're interested in any of those resources, feel free to check those out. But otherwise, we have all eyes ahead on episode 7, which should be in a few weeks. We're toying around with some other ideas right now. We may be coming out with some content before the other 3-week cadence. But just follow along on social media. We'll have those handles. They're both on screen now, but we'll also be there on the end credits screen. So follow along and don't miss any announcements, and we'll be getting all that information to you as it develops. All right, well, my voice is just about shot. I've got to go drink a bunch of water. Got some other things to do. Otherwise, happy Friday, everybody. Thank you again for tuning in to episode 6 of AWS What's Next. Thank you for making the show so great, and we will see you again back for episode 7. Take it easy and have a great weekend, everyone.
All right. See you, everyone.